A drunk man corners a single mom behind a diner, sneering. "Who's gonna stop me?" She moves faster than anyone could believe her hidden special forces training answers. At first the town cheers, but then the whispers begin. A powerful family posts bail. A lawsuit hits. Suddenly, she's not seen as a hero, but a threat. And just when she thinks it can't get worse, her little girl vanishes in the night. Now, with time running out, a mother must face the shadows of her past to save the one person she can't lose. The question is, can she outfight fear, betrayal, and power itself? Or will this town's secrets destroy them both? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The bell above the diner's door chimed softly as the last few customers of the evening wandered in from the cooling night air. Rachel Martin wiped down another table, her movements practiced and efficient. The familiar scent of coffee and tonight's meatloaf special hung in the air, mixing with the quiet conversations of regulars nursing their final cups of coffee. "Need a warm-up, Mrs. Henderson?" Rachel asked, holding up the coffee pot. The elderly woman at the counter smiled and nodded, pushing her cup forward. "You're an angel, Rachel," Mrs. Henderson said as the dark liquid steamed into her cup. "How's that bright girl of yours doing?" Rachel's eyes automatically shifted to the back booth where Emily sat, pencil in hand, concentration etched on her young face as she worked on her math homework. Pride warmed Rachel's chest. "She's doing great. Top of her class in science this semester." "That doesn't surprise me one bit," Mrs. Henderson chuckled. "Sharp as a tack, just like her mama." Rachel felt her cheeks flush at the compliment as she moved to the next table. Emily looked up from her work and caught her eye, giving her a quick wave and a smile that made everything in Rachel's world feel right. These quiet evening shifts were their routine now, Emily doing homework while Rachel finished up. Then they'd head home together for their nightly ritual of hot chocolate and sharing stories about their day. Mr. Jenkins emerged from the kitchen, his round face gleaming with satisfaction after another successful dinner service. He adjusted his white apron and glanced around the nearly empty diner with obvious pride. "Rachel, you've done enough cleaning for one night. Those tables are practically sparkling." "Just being thorough," Rachel replied, but she slowed her pace. Mr. Jenkins had been more than just a boss since she'd started working here 3 years ago. He'd given her a chance when she'd needed it most, never asking too many questions about her past. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "Emily's birthday is coming up next week, isn't it? I was thinking we could do something special here at the diner. Maybe that chocolate cake she loves so much?" Rachel's throat tightened with gratitude. "That's so thoughtful, Mr. Jenkins. She'd love that." "Well, that girl's brought more sunshine into this place than any kid I've ever known," he said, watching Emily work. "Reminds me of my Sarah at that age. Time flies, doesn't it?" Rachel nodded, thinking of all the changes the last few years had brought. The loss of Tom, the move to this small town, starting over. Emily had been her anchor through it all, handling everything with a resilience that sometimes took Rachel's breath away. "Mom!" Emily called out, holding up her notebook. "Can you check this problem for me? I think I got it, but I want to make sure." "Be right there, sweetie," Rachel replied, hanging her cleaning cloth on her apron string. She made her way to Emily's booth, sliding in beside her daughter. The math problem was indeed correct. Multiplication of fractions, done with careful precision. "Perfect," Rachel said, giving Emily's shoulder a squeeze. "You've really got the hang of this now." Emily beamed, then lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Mrs. Henderson's been here a long time. Do you think she's lonely?" Rachel glanced at the elderly woman, who was now gathering her things. "What makes you say that?" "Well, she always comes in right before closing, and she talks to everyone like she doesn't want to leave," Emily observed, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe we could invite her over for dinner sometime?" Rachel's heart swelled at her daughter's compassion. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. We'll ask her next time." The last customers began filtering out, leaving only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the clink of dishes as Mr. Jenkins started his closing routine in the kitchen. Rachel helped Emily pack up her schoolwork, then began her final tasks, counting the register, wiping down the counter one last time, and checking the coffee makers were all turned off. "Ready to head home?" Rachel asked, reaching for her keys. "Can we have hot chocolate tonight?" Emily asked, shouldering her backpack. "I finished all my homework." "You earned it," Rachel smiled. "Just wait inside while I take out the trash, okay? It'll only take a minute." Emily nodded, settling back into her booth with a book she'd pulled from her bag. Mr. Jenkins waved from the kitchen doorway. "Drive safe, you two. See you tomorrow." Rachel gathered the trash bags from behind the counter and headed toward the back door. The familiar weight of the day's work settled in her shoulders as she unlocked it, the cool evening air rushing in. The alley behind the diner was dark, lit only by a single yellow bulb above the door. She stepped out, letting the door close behind her, heading toward the dumpster with determined steps. The shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual tonight, but Rachel pushed away the unease. This was her town, her safe place. She'd left danger behind long ago. The metal lid of the dumpster clanged shut in the darkness behind Joe's diner. Rachel brushed her hands on her apron, the night air cool against her skin. Streetlights cast long shadows across the narrow alley, turning cardboard boxes and stacked milk crates into looming shapes. A bottle clinked against concrete. Rachel tensed, her body instantly alert. Heavy footsteps stumbled in the darkness, followed by slurred mumbling. A man emerged from behind the dumpster, swaying as he walked. Even in the dim light, Rachel could see his expensive suit was rumpled, his tie askew. "Well, what do we have here?" His words stretched and slurred together. "Pretty little waitress, all alone." Rachel's heart began to pound, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, you need to leave. We're closed." He lurched closer, and the sharp smell of whiskey filled the air. "Don't be like that, sweetheart. Just want to talk." His smile turned ugly as he moved between her and the door. Rachel's muscles coiled, ready. Years of training whispered in her mind. Training she'd tried so hard to forget. "Step aside," she said firmly. "My daughter's waiting inside." "A mama bear, huh?" He pressed forward, forcing her to back up until rough brick scraped against her shoulders. His bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Who's gonna stop me?" The words triggered something in Rachel, muscle memory she'd buried deep. Time seemed to slow as he reached for her arm. Without conscious thought, her body moved with fluid precision. She twisted away from his grasp, using his own momentum to throw him off balance. His surprise turned to anger as he stumbled. He swung wildly. Rachel deflected the punch easily, decades of Special Forces training taking over. Her movements were controlled, defensive rather than aggressive. She caught his arm, redirecting his force away from her. He crashed into a stack of empty boxes. "You little—" He scrambled up, pulling something from his pocket that glinted in the streetlight. A knife. Rachel's breath caught, but her stance remained solid. As he lunged forward, she stepped inside his reach. Her hand caught his wrist, applying precise pressure to the nerve points. The knife clattered to the ground. In one smooth motion, she twisted his arm behind his back and pushed him face first against the wall, holding him immobile. The back door of the diner creaked open. "Mom?" Emily's frightened voice cut through the night. "Emily, stay inside," Rachel called out, her heart racing at the thought of her daughter in danger. The man struggled against her hold, but she kept him pinned, using minimum force to maximum effect. Somewhere nearby, a door slammed. "I'm calling the police," a woman's voice shouted. Probably Mrs. Chen from the apartment above the laundromat. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The man continued to struggle and curse, but Rachel maintained her grip, careful not to cause injury, despite his resistance. Her thoughts whirled. How would she explain this? How much had Emily seen? Blue and red lights flooded the alley. 2 police cars screeched to a halt at the entrance, officers spilling out with flashlights drawn. "Over here," Rachel called out. "He's restrained." The officers approached quickly, taking in the scene. The dropped knife, Rachel's controlled hold on the struggling man, Emily's frightened face in the doorway. "Ma'am, we'll take it from here," one officer said, pulling out his handcuffs. Rachel released the man into their custody, stepping back as they secured him. Her hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Emily burst from the doorway and ran to her, wrapping small arms around her waist. "It's okay, sweetheart," Rachel murmured, holding her daughter close. "Everything's okay now." The officers led the handcuffed man toward their patrol car. He stumbled, still drunk, shouting threats and obscenities. Rachel turned Emily's face away, protecting her from the scene. "Mommy," Emily whispered against Rachel's apron, her voice shaking. "Are we safe?" Rachel held her daughter tighter, watching as the patrol car doors slammed shut. She could feel curious eyes peering from windows above the alley, knew there would be questions tomorrow about how a simple waitress had managed to subdue an armed attacker. But for now, all that mattered was the trembling child in her arms. Inside Joe's diner, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Rachel held Emily close on one of the worn leather booths. Her daughter's small frame trembled against her side, fingers clutching Rachel's waitress uniform. The familiar smell of coffee and pie that usually brought comfort now felt out of place against the lingering fear in the air. "You're safe now, sweetie," Rachel whispered, running her hand over Emily's hair. "I promise." Sheriff Daniels stood by their table, his notepad open as he finished taking Rachel's statement. His weathered face showed concern beneath his professional demeanor. He was a fixture in their small town, known for his fairness and calm approach to problems. "You handled yourself well out there, Mrs. Martin," he said, clicking his pen closed. "But I should warn you, that was Tommy Keller, his family." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Well, they have deep roots in this town." Rachel's stomach tightened. Everyone knew the Kellers, their name was on half the buildings downtown. "I just defended myself, Sheriff. He was drunk, and—" "No one's saying otherwise," Sheriff Daniels assured her quickly. "Just be prepared. The Kellers tend to have their own version of events." Through the diner's large windows, Rachel could see a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Some faces showed concern, others curiosity. She caught fragments of their whispered conversations. "Did you see how she took him down? Where'd a waitress learn moves like that? Something's not right about it." Emily looked up at her mother, blue eyes wide with questions. "Mom, why are they all staring?" Rachel forced a smile. "They're just worried about the commotion, that's all." She turned to Sheriff Daniels. "Are we free to go home now?" He nodded. "I'll have Deputy Roberts take your statement tomorrow. Get some rest." He tipped his hat and headed for the door, where the crowd parted respectfully. Mr. Jenkins, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "Take tomorrow off, Rachel. Paid leave. You've been through enough tonight." "Thank you," Rachel said softly, gathering Emily's backpack and homework from the back room. She guided her daughter through the kitchen and out the side door, avoiding the curious onlookers out front. Their old Honda sat alone in the employee parking area. Rachel checked the back seat before letting Emily in, an old habit she'd never quite shaken. The drive home was quiet except for the soft radio and the occasional sniffle from Emily. Their small house sat dark at the end of Maple Street. Rachel pulled into the driveway, automatically scanning the yard and shadows before getting out. Inside, she flipped on every light, moving from room to room with purpose. "Mom?" Emily stood in the hallway in her pajamas, watching as Rachel checked the locks on the windows for the second time. "Are you scared?" Rachel paused, her hand on the window latch. "No, honey. Just being careful." She crossed to her daughter and knelt down. "Remember what we always say? Better safe than sorry," Emily recited, managing a small smile. "That's right." Rachel hugged her tight. "Now, let's get you to bed. You've got that spelling test tomorrow." After tucking Emily in with an extra night light and leaving both their bedroom doors open, Rachel went to the kitchen. Her hands shook slightly as she filled the kettle for tea. The house creaked and settled around her, familiar sounds that suddenly seemed louder in the quiet. Sitting at the kitchen table, Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Steam rose in lazy spirals as she stared out the window into the darkness. The events in the alley played over in her mind. The muscle memory that had taken over, the precise movements she'd hoped never to use again. 7 years of building a new life, of being just Rachel, the waitress, just Emily's mom. 7 years of carefully constructed normalcy, threatened by 10 seconds of instinct. She took a sip of tea, but it tasted bitter. The kitchen clock ticked steadily on the wall. In Emily's room down the hall, she could hear soft breathing. Her daughter was safe, that's what mattered. But Rachel knew from experience how quickly whispers could spread in a small town, how questions could multiply like weeds. She thought of the faces outside the diner, the mix of awe and suspicion. How long before someone started digging? How long before they discovered that Rachel Martin hadn't always been Rachel Martin? The tea grew cold as she sat there, listening to the night, feeling the weight of her secrets pressed down like a physical thing. She'd chosen this quiet life for Emily, walked away from everything she'd been before. But tonight had shown her that the past wasn't so easily left behind. It lived in her muscles, in her reflexes, in the way her body responded to threat without conscious thought. The sound of Emily turning over in her sleep drifted down the hall. Rachel closed her eyes, letting out a long breath. For now, at least, her daughter was safe in her bed, unaware of the complications that tomorrow might bring. For tonight, that would have to be enough. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains as Rachel flipped pancakes on the griddle. The familiar sizzle and sweet aroma filled their small kitchen, trying to create normalcy after last night's events. Emily sat at the worn wooden table, already dressed in her purple soccer uniform, her cleats neatly placed by the door. "Can I have chocolate chips in mine, Mom?" Emily asked, swinging her legs under the table. Rachel managed a warm smile. "Already ahead of you, sweetheart." She slid a stack of chocolate chip pancakes onto Emily's plate, complete with a smiley face made of whipped cream. "Game day special." As Emily dug in, Rachel couldn't help but notice the dark circles under her daughter's eyes. Neither of them had slept well after the incident at the diner. Rachel's own muscles ached from tension, but she kept her movements fluid and calm for Emily's sake. "Are you excited about the game?" Rachel asked, sitting down with her own plate. "Yeah." Emily's enthusiasm broke through the morning's heaviness. "Coach says I might start as forward today." "That's wonderful." Rachel reached across to squeeze her daughter's hand. "I'll be cheering extra loud." They finished breakfast with light chatter about soccer strategies and Emily's teammates. Rachel packed their usual game day supplies, folding chairs, water bottles, and orange slices for the team, trying to focus on these simple tasks rather than the knot in her stomach. The town's soccer field sprawled behind the elementary school, already bustling with activity when they arrived. Parents set up chairs along the sidelines while kids warmed up on the dewy grass. Rachel noticed the first whispers as soon as they walked across the parking lot. "That's her." A mother in designer athletic wear murmured to her companion. From the diner last night, Rachel kept her eyes forward, guiding Emily toward her team with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Go on and warm up with Sarah and Katie," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "I'll get our spot set up." As Emily jogged off, Rachel unfolded her chair in her usual place along the sideline. She could feel the stares, hear the hushed conversations starting and stopping as parents walked past. "Did you hear what happened? They say she took him down like some kind of ninja, in the alley behind Joe's." "But how does a waitress know how to do that?" Mrs. Peterson, whose son played defense on Emily's team, usually sat next to Rachel during games. Today, she pointedly set up her chair several feet away, casting furtive glances in Rachel's direction. The referee's whistle cut through the morning air, and the girls took their positions on the field. Emily bounced on her toes at the forward position, her ponytail swinging with excitement. Rachel forced herself to focus on her daughter's joy rather than the growing discomfort around her. "That was quite a scene at the diner," came a voice from behind. Rachel turned to find Linda Barnes, the PTA president, standing with her arms crossed. "I heard you really did a number on poor Tom Wilson." Rachel's jaw tightened. "He was drunk and threatening me in a dark alley." "Mm-hmm." Linda's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. "How exactly does someone like you know moves like that? My husband's on the force, and he says even trained officers would have trouble with what you did." Before Rachel could respond, cheers erupted from the crowd. Emily had the ball, weaving between defenders with natural grace. Rachel jumped to her feet, grateful for the interruption. "Go, Emily. You've got this." Emily's shot sailed past the goalkeeper into the net. Rachel clapped and whooped, her heart swelling with pride as Emily's teammates swarmed her with hugs. But the joy deflated slightly when she noticed Mr. Scode and Mrs. Henderson, longtime residents and church deacons, standing near the goal post. They watched Rachel rather than the game, speaking in low voices and shaking their heads with clear disapproval. "It just seems excessive," Rachel overheard Mrs. Henderson say. "What kind of example is that for the children?" The game continued, but Rachel felt increasingly isolated in her little pocket of sideline. Parents who normally chatted with her about school fundraisers and recipe exchanges now gave her a wide berth. A few offered tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Between plays, Rachel caught fragments of conversations that made her stomach churn. "Military background, I heard. Keeping secrets all this time. Makes you wonder what else she's hiding." The sun climbed higher in the sky as the game progressed, but Rachel felt cold despite the warmth. She watched Emily play with fierce determination, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding on the sidelines. Her daughter's joy and innocence stood in stark contrast to the growing cloud of suspicion around Rachel. Halfway through the second quarter, Jennifer Mills, whose daughter had played with Emily since kindergarten, approached Rachel's chair. "How do you know moves like that, Rachel?" she asked directly, her voice carrying just enough for nearby parents to hear. "I mean, those aren't exactly skills you pick up waiting tables." Rachel gripped her water bottle tighter, feeling the plastic crinkle under her fingers. She kept her eyes on the field, where Emily was positioning herself for a corner kick. "I took some self-defense classes," she said quietly, the lie tasting bitter in her mouth. "After Mike died. For safety." Jennifer made a skeptical sound. "Self-defense classes don't teach you to take down grown men like that. Sarah's husband saw the whole thing, says it was like something out of an action movie." Out on the field, Emily scored another goal, her face lighting up as she searched the sidelines for her mother. Rachel stood and cheered, forcing enthusiasm into her voice, despite the heaviness in her chest. But even as she celebrated her daughter's achievement, she noticed Mr. Pr and Mrs. Henderson still watching her, their heads shaking in clear disapproval as they whispered to each other. The morning sun now felt too bright, too exposing. Rachel remained standing, suddenly conscious of every movement, every expression, knowing that the entire sideline was watching her through new and suspicious eyes. Her carefully constructed world of normalcy was cracking, and through those cracks her past was beginning to seep through. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of First Community Church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Rachel sat beside Emily in their usual spot, 5 rows from the front. Emily's patent leather shoes swung back and forth, barely touching the carpeted floor, as she hummed along with the closing notes of Amazing Grace. Pastor Grace stepped up to the pulpit, her silver-streaked hair neatly swept back, her kind eyes scanning the congregation. The usual rustle of Bible pages and shifting bodies settled into attentive silence. "Today," Pastor Grace began, her voice warm and steady, "I want to talk about courage. Not the kind we read about in adventure stories, but the quiet courage we see in everyday life." Her gaze briefly met Rachel's. "The courage of a parent protecting their child. The courage to stand up when others sit down. The courage to face our fears and do what's right, even when it costs us something." Rachel felt her throat tighten. Emily leaned against her arm, and Rachel wrapped it around her daughter's shoulders. "In the book of Joshua," Pastor Grace continued, "we read, 'Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.'" These words weren't just for Joshua, they're for all of us, especially in moments when we face our own battles. The sermon touched on stories of everyday heroes, teachers, nurses, parents, people who showed bravery not through violence but through love and protection. Rachel could feel occasional glances from other churchgoers, some sympathetic, others questioning. When the service ended, Emily bounced up from the pew. "Can we get cookies from the fellowship hall, Mom?" "In a minute, sweetie." Rachel smoothed Emily's dress. Already people were approaching their pew. Mrs. Thompson, who owned the local flower shop, touched Rachel's arm. "Thank you for what you did at the diner. My daughter works late shifts too. It's good to know there are people like you around." Before Rachel could respond, Mr. Peterson, a retired school teacher, stepped forward. "That was quite a display of skill, Mrs. Martin. Where exactly did you learn those moves?" Rachel felt her smile freeze. "I took some self-defense classes," she said carefully. From behind them came Mrs. Whitfield's precise, cutting voice. "Self-defense classes? That's not what I heard." The older woman's perfectly coiffed gray hair matched her pressed gray suit. "My nephew works at the courthouse, you know. He had the most interesting things to say about your background checks." The small group grew quiet. Emily looked up at her mother, confusion clear on her young face. "Perhaps," Pastor Grace's calm voice cut through the tension as she approached, "we could remember that we're still in God's house. Mrs. Whitfield, I believe your committee meeting starts in 5 minutes?" Mrs. Whitfield's lips tightened, but she nodded curtly and moved away, already whispering to another woman. "Emily," Pastor Grace smiled warmly, "I believe Mrs. Jenkins just put out fresh chocolate chip cookies in the fellowship hall. Why don't you go get some before they're all gone?" Emily looked uncertainly at Rachel, who nodded. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Save one for me." Once Emily was out of earshot, Pastor Grace gestured to her office. "Would you like to talk?" Rachel followed her into the small room lined with books. Through the window she could see children playing on the church lawn. Pastor Grace closed the door and sat not behind her desk, but in one of 2 comfortable chairs in the corner. "It's true," Rachel said quietly, sinking into the other chair. "I served in special forces. After James died in Afghanistan, I couldn't bear to stay in. Emily needed stability, a normal life. We moved here for a fresh start." Pastor Grace nodded, her expression free of judgment. "And you've given Emily that stable life. You've been a wonderful mother, Rachel." "Have I?" Rachel's voice cracked. "I've been living with this secret, trying to be just a waitress, just a mom. But now," she gestured helplessly, "Mrs. Whitfield is right now probably telling everyone about my past. What will they think? What will they tell their children about Emily's mom?" "Secrets don't define your worth, Rachel," Pastor Grace said firmly. "What defines you is how you love your daughter, how you serve this community, how you've chosen to use your skills to protect, not harm." She leaned forward. "God doesn't waste our experiences, even the ones we'd rather leave behind. Perhaps your training was meant for exactly such a moment as this." Rachel wiped at her eyes. "I just wanted to keep Emily safe." "And you did?" Pastor Grace smiled. "That's what matters." A knock at the door interrupted them. Emily poked her head in, holding a napkin with cookies. "Mom? I saved you the biggest one." Rachel managed a genuine smile. "Thank you, baby. Ready to head home?" They said goodbye to Pastor Grace and walked through the now emptying church. In the parking lot, Mrs. Whitfield stood with a group of women, their heads bent together in conversation. As Rachel and Emily passed, the whispers paused and several heads turned to watch them. Emily's small hand slipped into Rachel's. "Mom, are you okay?" Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand, drawing strength from the simple gesture. She might be the former Special Forces operator, but right now, her daughter's innocent support felt like the most powerful force in the world. Rachel pushed through the diner's swinging doors, tying her apron around her waist. The familiar smell of coffee and fresh-baked pies wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Afternoon sunlight poured through the large windows, making the chrome fixtures gleam. "There she is," old Joe called from his usual corner booth. He raised his coffee mug in salute. "Our very own guardian angel." Heat crept up Rachel's neck as other regulars turned to smile and wave. She ducked her head, focusing on straightening her name tag. "Just doing my job, folks." "Mr. Jenkins emerged from the kitchen, his round face beaming. "Rachel, good to see you." He patted her shoulder with his flour-dusted hand. "Coffee's on the house for you this week." "And that's not up for debate," he added when she started to protest. "You're too kind, Mr. Jenkins," Rachel said softly. She fell into her routine, refilling coffee cups and taking orders. Each time the bell above the door chimed, friendly faces greeted her. Mrs. Peterson squeezed her hand while ordering her usual tuna melt. The Henderson twins gave her shy waves from their booth. "My Harold told me what happened," Mrs. Peterson said, her weathered face creased with concern. "That drunk fellow got what he deserved. You did right, protecting yourself." Rachel managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson." As the afternoon stretched on, more regulars filtered in. Some simply nodded, Others openly praised her quick thinking. The warmth of their support eased the knot that had been sitting in her chest since Friday night. "Order up," called Sophie from the kitchen. Rachel grabbed the plates of steaming pot roast, grateful for the distraction. The bell chimed again at exactly 3:15. Rachel's heart lifted at the familiar sound of Mary Jane's shoes clicking across the linoleum floor. "Mom!" Emily's backpack bounced as she ran to the counter, her braids swinging. "Guess what? In social studies today, we had to write about our heroes, and I wrote about you." Rachel's throat tightened. She set down her coffee pot and pulled Emily into a quick hug. "You did?" "Uh-huh. Mrs. Banks said it was very good. She gave me an A+. Emily's face glowed with pride. "I wrote about how brave you are, and how you help people, and—" "Here's your usual chocolate milk, sweetheart," Mr. Jenkins interrupted, sliding a tall glass across the counter. He winked at Rachel. "On the house, of course." Emily climbed onto a stool, homework spread out before her. Rachel watched her daughter between serving customers, heart swelling at Emily's focused expression as she worked on her math problems. "You've got a good one there," Mr. Jenkins said quietly, appearing at Rachel's elbow. "Smart as a whip, just like her mama." "She's the best thing in my life," Rachel replied. The afternoon rush wound down as the sun began to set. Rachel untied her apron while Emily packed up her books. "Great work today," Mr. Jenkins called as they headed for the door. "See you tomorrow." Outside, the early evening air was crisp and sweet. Emily skipped beside Rachel, chattering about her day. Their shadows stretched long across the sidewalk as they walked the familiar route home. "And then at recess, Sarah told everyone about how you stopped that bad man," Emily continued. "The other kids thought it was so cool. Tommy said his dad saw it happen and that you moved super fast like a ninja." Rachel chuckled. "I wouldn't say like a ninja." "Well, I think you're better than a ninja," Emily declared. "You're like a superhero, but in regular clothes." They turned onto their street, lined with maple trees just starting to show hints of fall colors. Their little white house sat halfway down the block, its blue shutters cheerful in the golden light. Emily ran ahead to check the mailbox, as she always did. "Mom, there's lots of mail today." Rachel reached the mailbox just as Emily pulled out a stack of envelopes. On top was a plain white envelope with no return address. Something about it made Rachel's skin prickle. "Here, sweetie, why don't you go unlock the door?" Rachel handed Emily the house key, taking the mail from her small hands. As Emily bounded up the front walk, Rachel stood by the mailbox staring at the unmarked envelope. With slightly trembling fingers, she tore it open. The message inside was typed in bold letters. "You think you're safe? We'll ruin you." Rachel's heart thudded against her ribs. She quickly folded the letter and stuffed it in her pocket as Emily called from the porch. "Mom, are you coming?" "Be right there, honey." Rachel forced her voice to stay steady. She gathered the rest of the mail, trying to ignore how her hands shook. Emily stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of their home. "Can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" Rachel climbed the porch steps, managing a smile she didn't feel. "Sure thing, sweetheart." They walked inside together, Emily's excited chatter about dinner filling their small entryway. The threatening letter seemed to burn in Rachel's pocket, but she kept her face calm as she closed and locked the door behind them. Rachel stood at the kitchen counter, steam rising from her coffee mug as she unfolded the morning newspaper. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm squares on the worn linoleum floor. At the small round table, Emily spooned cereal into her mouth, milk dribbling down her chin. "Mom, can we get a puppy?" Emily asked. Not for the first time this week. "Sarah just got one, and he's so cute." Rachel's response died in her throat as she saw the headline splashed across the front page. "Local man released on bail claims innocence." Her hands tightened on the paper, crinkling its edges. Below the headline was a photo of Thomas Keller, the man from the alley, looking clean-cut in a suit as he left the courthouse. The bruise on his jaw from where she defended herself was barely visible. "Mom?" Emily's spoon clinked against her bowl. "You okay?" Rachel forced her features to soften. "Just fine, sweetie. Finish up your breakfast, bus'll be here soon." She skimmed the article, her stomach knotting with each paragraph. The story painted Keller as a respected businessman who'd had one too many and made a regrettable mistake. It mentioned his family's contributions to the town's development and quoted his lawyer, claiming Rachel had used unnecessary and excessive force against an unarmed citizen. After seeing Emily off to school, Rachel drove to work through streets that suddenly felt hostile. Every familiar face seemed to hide judgment behind their waves and smiles. The morning rush at the diner started normally enough. Rachel moved between tables with practiced ease, refilling coffee cups and taking orders. But something was different. Conversations hushed when she approached, only to resume in heated whispers after she walked away. Near the counter, two men, Bob Wheeler from the hardware store and Dave Patterson, who owned the local garage, were having an increasingly loud discussion. "Come on, Bob," Dave said, jabbing his fork at his eggs. The guy was drunk. She could have just pushed him away or called for help. And what if he'd grabbed her first? Bob countered. You expecting her to just hope someone heard her scream? Rachel's hands shook slightly as she set plates down at a nearby booth. She could feel eyes on her back. "My cousin's a cop," a woman at table 6 said loud enough to carry. "Says those special forces types are trained killers. Can't turn it off once they learn it." "Did you see his face in the paper?" another voice chimed in. She could have really heard him. "Well, I heard—" The speaker cut off abruptly as Rachel approached with the coffee pot. "More coffee?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The woman shook her head without meeting Rachel's eyes. Mr. Jenkins caught her eye from behind the counter and gave her a sympathetic look. She managed a weak smile back, but her chest felt tight. These were people she'd served for months, whose children played with Emily, who'd sent casseroles when they'd first moved to town and were settling in. During her break, Rachel sat in the back booth, picking at a sandwich she couldn't taste. Two elderly women at the next table spoke in what they probably thought were subtle tones. "It's just not natural, a woman knowing how to fight like that. And with a child at home? What kind of example is she setting? I always thought there was something off about her. Too quiet, too. Contained." Rachel's throat burned. She wanted to stand up, to tell them about the years of discipline it took to learn control, about how that training had saved lives overseas, about how she'd walked away from that life to give Emily a chance at a normal childhood. Instead, she gathered her plates and headed to the kitchen, letting the door swing shut behind her. The afternoon dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour. Rachel moved through her tasks mechanically, trying to ignore the whispers and stares. She'd faced worse in combat, she told herself. But somehow this felt different, more personal, more isolating. Around 3 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. Sheriff Daniels walked in, his weathered face creased with concern. He settled onto a stool at the counter, waiting until Rachel came over. "Coffee, Sheriff?" she asked, already reaching for a mug. "Thanks, Rachel." He glanced around before leaning forward slightly. "Got some news you should know about." Rachel's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "About Keller?" The sheriff nodded, his voice low. "His family's hired Cartwright, son's big city lawyers. They're talking about filing charges." He paused, studying her face. "The Kellers. They've got influence here, Rachel. Deep roots. And they're not happy about their boy being embarrassed like that." Rachel set the pot down carefully, aware of how many eyes were watching this exchange. "What are you saying, Sheriff?" "I'm saying watch your back, these folks." He shook his head. "They don't like losing face, and they've got friends in places that matter." Rachel thought about Emily, about the life they'd built here, about the warmth and acceptance they'd found until now. She thought about running again, starting over somewhere new, but she was tired of running. "Thank you for the warning," she said quietly. The sheriff stood, dropping a few dollars on the counter. "For what it's worth, I saw the security footage from the alley. You did everything by the book. Minimal force, clean technique." He adjusted his hat. "Problem is, some people around here, they don't want to see it that way." As he turned to leave, Rachel called after him softly. "Sheriff, why are you telling me this?" He paused at the door. "Because everyone deserves a fair shake, Rachel. Even folks with complicated pasts." The bell chimed again as he left, leaving Rachel standing behind the counter, feeling the weight of dozens of questioning stares pressing in around her. The evening settled over their small house like a heavy blanket. In the cozy living room, Rachel sat beside Emily at the coffee table, geometry homework spread before them. Warm lamplight cast a gentle glow over Emily's furrowed brow as she wrestled with angles and triangles. "I don't get it, Mom," Emily sighed, tapping her pencil against her workbook. "When am I ever going to use this stuff?" Rachel smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You'd be surprised. Remember when we built that treehouse in the backyard? All those angles had to be just right." Emily's face brightened. "Oh yeah, that was fun." She bent back over her work with renewed interest, her pencil scratching across the paper. Rachel watched her daughter work, treasuring these quiet moments. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, dishes from dinner dried in the rack, and everything felt normal, almost peaceful. She'd managed to push the morning's newspaper headline to the back of her mind, focusing instead on helping Emily master her math problems. A sharp knock at the front door shattered their tranquil evening. Emily jumped, her pencil skittering across the page. "Who's that?" Rachel's spine stiffened, her body tensing automatically. "Stay here, sweetie," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden rush of adrenaline. She moved to the door with measured steps, years of training kicking in as she checked through the peephole. A man in a courier's uniform stood on their porch, clipboard in hand. Relief mingled with uncertainty as Rachel opened the door, keeping the chain lock fastened. "Rachel Martin?" the courier asked, consulting his clipboard. "Yes? I have a certified letter for you. Need your signature." He held up an electronic tablet through the gap. Rachel closed the door, undid the chain, and reopened it. As she signed the tablet, she noticed her hand trembling slightly. The courier handed her a thick envelope and departed with a polite nod. Back in the living room, Emily looked up from her homework. "What is it, Mom?" Rachel stared at the return address, a law firm she didn't recognize. With unsteady fingers, she tore open the envelope and began reading. The words seemed to swim before her eyes. Notice of civil action, assault and battery, excessive force, psychological evaluation, custody evaluation. The paper shook in her hands. Her throat tightened as the implications sank in. They weren't just trying to sue her, they were trying to paint her as dangerous, unstable. The kind of mother who shouldn't have custody of her child. "Mom?" Emily's voice quavered. "What's wrong?" Rachel looked up to find Emily standing beside her, blue eyes wide with concern. The sight of her daughter's worried face broke something inside her. She pulled Emily into a fierce hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Some people are trying to cause trouble for us," Rachel whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know something, Emily Martin." She pulled back to look into her daughter's eyes. "I will never, ever let anyone take you away from me. Do you understand?" Emily nodded solemnly, wrapping her arms tighter around Rachel's waist. "I know, Mom. You're the strongest person in the whole world." Rachel's heart clenched at her daughter's unwavering faith. If only it were that simple. Physical strength wouldn't win this battle. Not when the enemy was using the legal system as a weapon. "How about we finish that homework?" Rachel suggested, forcing a smile. "Then maybe we can have some hot chocolate before bed?" Emily brightened at the mention of hot chocolate, returning to her geometry problems with renewed determination. Rachel sat beside her, helping with angles and measurements while her mind raced with fears and possibilities. The lawsuit papers sat on the kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. Later, after Emily was tucked into bed with a kiss and an extra long hug, Rachel retreated to her own bedroom. The house creaked and settled around her as she knelt beside her bed, clasping her hands together. Tears she'd held back all evening finally spilled down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered into the darkness, her voice breaking. "I know I've made mistakes. I know my past isn't perfect. But please, don't let them take my baby. Give me the strength to fight this. To protect her." She pressed her forehead against her clasped hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Please." The clock on her nightstand ticked steadily, marking time as Rachel remained on her knees, praying for guidance, for strength, for a way through the storm that threatened to tear apart everything she'd built. The morning sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden floor of Pastor Grace's office. Rachel sat in a cushioned chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while the pastor arranged 2 steaming mugs of tea on her desk. "I just don't know what to do anymore," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The lawsuit, the rumors, the way people look at me now." She accepted the offered mug with trembling fingers. Pastor Grace settled into her chair, her kind eyes studying Rachel's face. The office felt like a sanctuary, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the soft tick-tock of an old wall clock marking time. "Tell me what's weighing on your heart," Pastor Grace said, her tone gentle but firm. Rachel took a sip of tea, letting the warmth steady her. "I thought I'd left that life behind. The training, the missions, it was all supposed to stay in the past. But now—" She glanced out the window where Emily sat on a bench in the church garden, nose buried in a book. "Now it's threatening everything I've built here." "Your past isn't something to be ashamed of, Rachel." Pastor Grace leaned forward. "Those skills saved you, and who knows how many others they might have saved before. But the town doesn't see it that way." Rachel's fingers tightened around the mug. "They're painting me as some kind of violent person. Mrs. Whitfield actually pulled her daughter away when we passed them at the grocery store yesterday." Pastor Grace's face softened with compassion. "People fear what they don't understand, but hiding who you are won't help them understand better." "What am I supposed to do? Stand up in church and announce I was Special Forces?" Rachel's attempt at humor fell flat, her voice catching. "Actually," Pastor Grace smiled, "something like that might not be a bad idea." She reached for a small calendar on her desk. "We have our women's Bible study group tomorrow evening. The topic is Finding Strength in Faith. Would you consider sharing your story?" Rachel's chest tightened. I don't know if I can. The group is small, maybe 15 women. Many of them already know you from the diner." Pastor Grace's voice was encouraging. "Sometimes, Rachel, what we see as our greatest weakness is actually God's way of showing His strength through us." Rachel watched Emily through the window, her daughter's face peaceful as she turned another page. "But what if they judge me even more harshly? What if this makes things worse for Emily?" "Trust takes courage," Pastor Grace said, setting down her mug. "Just like it took courage to protect yourself that night. But this time, instead of physical strength, you'll be showing them your heart." Rachel fell silent, considering. The wall clock ticked steadily, marking each moment of decision. "Emily's proud of you, you know," Pastor Grace added softly. "I heard her telling the Sunday school children about her brave mom." Tears pricked at Rachel's eyes. She shouldn't have to be brave about this. She should just get to be a normal kid. But she is a normal kid, one who loves her mother and isn't afraid to show it. Pastor Grace reached across the desk, touching Rachel's hand. "Maybe it's time to let the rest of us see what Emily sees." Rachel took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll come to the Bible study. Remember, Rachel, God doesn't waste our experiences. Even the ones that feel like burdens can become bridges to others." Standing up, Rachel smoothed her jeans and managed a small smile. "Thank you, Pastor Grace, for everything." "We're here for you." Pastor Grace rose and came around the desk to give Rachel a warm hug. "Both the Lord and this congregation." Rachel walked to the office door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "What time tomorrow?" 7 o'clock. We'll meet in the fellowship hall." Pastor Grace's smile was encouraging. "Just come as you are." Outside in the garden, Emily looked up from her book and waved. Rachel waved back, then stepped out into the morning sunshine. Emily gathered her things and bounced over to her mother's side. "Can we get ice cream?" Emily asked, slipping her small hand into Rachel's. Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand, drawing strength from the simple contact. "Maybe after lunch, sweetie." They walked together down the church steps, Rachel holding Emily's hand tightly. With each step, she felt her resolve building. Maybe Pastor Grace was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding and start trusting. Emily chatted about her book as they walked, her voice bright and clear in the morning air. Rachel listened, grateful for her daughter's uncomplicated joy, and thought about tomorrow evening. The prospect of sharing her story still scared her, but she felt something else too, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, truth could build stronger bridges than silence ever could. The fellowship hall buzzed with quiet conversation as 24 women settled into metal folding chairs arranged in a circle. The familiar scent of coffee and homemade cookies filled the air. Rachel sat between Pastor Grace and Mrs. Thompson, her hands fidgeting with the worn Bible in her lap. Emily had insisted on coming, refusing to stay home with a babysitter. She now sat in the corner with a few other children, working on her math homework and occasionally glancing up at her mother with encouraging smiles. "Ladies, let's begin with a prayer," Pastor Grace said, her gentle voice cutting through the chatter. The room fell silent as heads bowed. "Lord, guide our hearts tonight. Help us listen with compassion and speak with understanding. Amen." Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs as Pastor Grace gestured for her to speak. The circle of faces turned toward her, some friendly, others guarded. Mrs. Whitfield sat directly across from her, lips pressed into a thin line. "I." Rachel's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and started again. "I know there have been a lot of rumors about what happened at the diner. About my past." She glanced at Emily, drawing strength from her daughter's presence. "I think it's time I told you the truth." The plastic chair squeaked as Rachel shifted. "Before I was a waitress, before I was a mother, I served in the Special Forces." A collective intake of breath filled the room. "It wasn't something I planned. I enlisted young, showed aptitude, and was recruited. I excelled at protecting people." Mrs. Whitfield's whisper carried across the circle. "More like hurting people." Several women shot her disapproving looks. Rachel's hands trembled, but she pressed on. "I met my husband there. When he died in action, I knew I had to leave that life behind. Emily needed stability, peace. That's all I've wanted since moving here, to be a good mother, to live quietly. But violence follows violence." Mrs. Whitfield interjected louder this time. "Look what happened in that alley." "Susan," Pastor Grace warned, but Rachel held up her hand. "No, let me address this." Rachel met Mrs. Whitfield's gaze. "What happened in that alley wasn't about violence. It was about protection. I used the minimum force necessary to keep myself safe. Those skills, they're not about hurting people. They're about preventing harm." Sarah Miller, a young mother of 3, leaned forward. "I'm grateful you had those skills. That man could have." She glanced at the children in the corner. "Well, who knows what might have happened?" Several women nodded in agreement. Mrs. Thompson reached over and squeezed Rachel's hand. "But how can we be sure?" Mrs. Whitfield persisted. "How do we know you won't snap one day? Military training, PTSD, we've all heard the stories." Rachel felt tears burning behind her eyes. "Because everything I do, every choice I make, is for my daughter. I left that life behind, not because I was broken, but because I chose love over war. I chose peace." Emily looked up from her homework, her face glowing with pride. Rachel managed a small smile for her. "I understand being afraid," Rachel continued softly. "But I'm not asking for acceptance of violence. I'm asking for understanding that sometimes protecting peace requires strength. Sometimes love means being ready to defend what matters most." The room fell silent. Even Mrs. Whitfield seemed to be considering Rachel's words. Martha Chen, who rarely spoke at these meetings, suddenly raised her hand. "My grandfather was in the military," she said quietly. "He always said that true warriors pray hardest for peace." "Rachel, I believe you." One by one, women began sharing their own stories, of protecting children from harm, of standing up to threats, of choosing difficult paths for the sake of love. The atmosphere in the room slowly shifted from tension to understanding. Mrs. Whitfield remained silent, but Rachel noticed her rigid posture softening slightly. Pastor Grace stood, extending her hands. "Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you for Rachel's honesty tonight, for reminding us that strength and gentleness can coexist, that love sometimes wears unexpected faces. Help us support each other, not with judgment, but with grace." As the prayer continued, Rachel felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Emily had abandoned her homework and crept over, wrapping her arms around her mother's waist. After the meeting, women approached Rachel one by one. Some offered hugs, others shared words of encouragement. A few simply squeezed her hand in silent support. Mrs. Whitfield walked past without a word, but paused at the door. She turned slightly, not quite meeting Rachel's eyes. "I'll be praying for you," she said stiffly, then hurried out. The drive home was quiet, streetlights casting intermittent shadows across the dashboard. Rachel glanced in the rearview mirror at Emily, who had fallen asleep against the window, her math worksheet clutched to her chest. Houses lined the dark street, some with warm lights glowing in windows, others completely dark. Behind those walls, Rachel knew, lived people who had heard her story tonight. Some would stand with her, others would continue to doubt. As she drove past each home, she wondered which was which, but Emily's peaceful breathing in the back seat reminded her that maybe it didn't matter as much as she thought. Her daughter's unwavering faith in her, Pastor Grace's steady support, and the surprising allies she'd found tonight, perhaps that would be enough. The school gymnasium hummed with excited chatter as parents filed into the metal bleachers. Colorful posters and student artwork decorated the walls, and a simple podium stood center stage beneath fluorescent lights. Rachel found a spot in the middle section, smoothing her waitress uniform. She'd come straight from her morning shift at the diner. Mrs. Anderson, Emily's teacher, tapped the microphone. "Welcome everyone to our annual Family Heritage presentation. Our fifth graders have worked hard on their projects about someone who inspires them." Rachel watched various students present their projects about grandparents who immigrated to America, uncles who served as firefighters, and aunts who overcame illness. Her heart quickened as Emily's turn approached. They hadn't discussed what Emily would say. Her daughter had insisted on keeping it a surprise. Emily stepped onto the stage, carrying a large poster board, decorated with photos and carefully written captions. Her dark ponytail bounced as she walked, wearing her favorite blue dress, the one that matched her eyes, just like Rachel's. She stood straight and tall at the podium, adjusting the microphone with small hands that showed only the slightest tremor. "My name is Emily Martin," she began, her clear voice carrying across the gymnasium. "And my hero is my mom." Rachel's breath caught. Several heads turned toward her, but she kept her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Some kids think heroes have to wear capes or have superpowers," Emily continued, pointing to a photo of Rachel in her waitress uniform. "But my mom is a hero every single day. She works really hard at the diner to take care of us, and she never complains even when her feet hurt after standing all day." Emily flipped her poster to reveal more pictures, Rachel helping at school events, the two of them at church, moments from their quiet life together. "My mom taught me that being brave isn't about being the strongest or the loudest. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." Rachel felt tears welling up as Emily's voice grew stronger. "2 weeks ago, my mom protected herself from a bad man. Some people in town said mean things about her, but they don't know her like I do. They don't know how she reads me stories every night, or makes soup when I'm sick, or helps old Mrs. Jenkins carry her groceries every Sunday after church." The gymnasium had grown completely silent. Rachel could see other parents dabbing at their eyes. Even Mrs. Anderson was sniffling quietly at the side of the stage. "My mom used to be in the Special Forces," Emily revealed, and Rachel noticed a few surprised murmurs. "But she gave it up to take care of me after my dad died. She could have stayed in the military, but she chose me instead." Emily's voice wavered slightly. "That's what makes her a real hero. She always chooses love first." Emily turned to a final photo, one of Rachel and Emily at the park, both laughing as they fed ducks by the pond. "Some people think being strong means hurting others. But my mom is the strongest person I know because she protects people. She taught me that true courage means standing up for what's right and taking care of others." Rachel couldn't hold back her tears now. They rolled freely down her cheeks as she watched her daughter stand tall and proud on that stage. "So, this is my heritage project," Emily concluded. "I come from a long line of brave women. My grandmother was a nurse who helped sick people. My mom was a soldier who protected our country. And now, she's the best mom in the world, showing me every day what it means to be truly strong." The gymnasium erupted in applause. Parents stood, many wiping tears from their eyes. Mrs. Anderson hugged Emily as she stepped down from the podium. Rachel could see several of the women from church smiling warmly at her, including some who had been skeptical at the Bible study. Emily's classmates crowded around her, asking questions and admiring her poster. Even Mrs. Whitfield, who sat a few rows ahead, turned to give Rachel an acknowledging nod. For a moment, Rachel felt the weight of the past 2 weeks lifting. Her daughter's pure, honest words had cut through the gossip and suspicion, showing the truth of who she really was. Not a dangerous ex-soldier, but a mother who would do anything to protect her child and her community. As the applause died down and the next student prepared to present, Rachel glanced around the gymnasium, savoring this moment of acceptance. That's when she saw him, the drunk man's brother, standing at the back near the exit doors. His face was twisted in a scowl, his eyes boring into her with undisguised hatred. Rachel's heart sank, but she forced herself to sit tall, refusing to let his presence diminish Emily's moment. Her daughter had shown more courage than anyone today, speaking truth with love. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The morning sun cast long shadows across the granite steps of the county courthouse. Rachel adjusted her navy blazer, the only formal outfit she owned, and clutched her manila folder of documents close to her chest. Her sensible shoes clicked against the polished floor as she made her way through the security checkpoint. "Arms out, please," the guard instructed, waving his metal detector wand. Rachel complied, fighting the muscle memory that wanted to assess the guard's stance, catalog escape routes, spot tactical advantages. Old habits died hard. The public defender's office was tucked away in a cramped corner of the first floor. Rachel checked the name on the door. Martin Wheeler, attorney at law. She knocked softly. "Come in," called a tired voice. Martin Wheeler looked exactly like what Rachel expected from a public defender: rumpled suit, coffee-stained tie, and dark circles under his eyes. Files and papers covered every surface of his small office. "Mrs. Martin, please, have a seat." He cleared a stack of folders from the chair across his desk. "I've reviewed your case file." Rachel perched on the edge of the chair. "How bad is it?" Wheeler sighed, removing his wire-rimmed glasses to rub his eyes. "I won't sugarcoat this. The opposing counsel is painting you as a trained killer with PTSD who poses a danger to the community." Rachel's stomach clenched. "But I defended myself. He attacked me." "I know. But Gerald Thompson's family has deep pockets and connections. They've hired Burton Associates, one of the best firms in the state." Wheeler shuffled through some papers. "They're going to drag your entire military record into this. Every mission, every combat situation." "Those records are classified," Rachel protested. "They've already filed motions to have them unsealed for the proceedings." Wheeler leaned forward. "Look, Mrs. Martin, I need to know everything. Any incidents during your service that could be twisted against you?" Rachel's mind flashed to desert nights, split-second decisions, faces she tried to forget. "I followed my orders. I served with honor." "That's not what I asked." Wheeler's voice was gentle but firm. Rachel took a deep breath. "There was one mission in Kandahar. Things went wrong. Civilians." She couldn't finish the sentence. Wheeler nodded grimly. "They'll use that. They'll say you have a history of violence, that the incident with Thompson was excessive force driven by combat trauma." "I'm not violent," Rachel whispered. "I'm a mother, a waitress. I just wanted to protect myself." "I believe you." Wheeler picked up a legal pad. "But belief doesn't win cases. We need character witnesses, people who will testify to your peaceful nature, your contributions to the community." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sheriff Daniels stood in the doorway, his familiar presence immediately calming Rachel's nerves. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said, stepping inside. "Mrs. Martin, I wanted to catch you before you left." Wheeler brightened. "Sheriff Daniels, perfect timing. We were just discussing character witnesses." The sheriff pulled up another chair. "That's why I'm here. I saw the whole incident report." Rachel acted with admirable restraint. If anything, she prevented serious harm to herself and Thompson. "You'll testify to that?" Wheeler asked. "Absolutely." Daniels turned to Rachel. "The whole department's behind you. Thompson's got a record of harassment complaints, but his family's always bought him out of trouble. It's time someone stood up to them. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Sheriff. The meeting continued for another hour, Wheeler taking detailed notes as they built their defense strategy. But Rachel couldn't shake the sick feeling in her stomach. Her past, the part of herself she'd tried so hard to bury, was about to be exposed for everyone to see. Finally, Wheeler closed his notepad. We'll meet again next week to prep your testimony. In the meantime, document any harassment or threats. And Mrs. Martin? He gave her a serious look. Stay calm. Don't give them any ammunition. Rachel nodded, gathering her things. Sheriff Daniels walked her to her car in the courthouse parking lot. Keep your chin up, he said. This town's got more good people than bad. They'll see the truth. I hope so, Rachel replied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. The drive home felt longer than usual. Rachel's mind raced with worries about Emily, about their future in this town, about the memories she'd have to relive in court. She turned onto their quiet street, looking forward to a hot shower and maybe some mindless TV before picking up Emily from school. But as she pulled into her driveway, her heart stopped. Fresh red paint marred the white fence she'd repainted just last spring. 2 words screamed their accusation. Baby killer! Rachel sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The morning sun felt too bright, too exposing, as if spotlighting her shame for all the neighbors to see. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't brush them away. She just stared at those hateful words, feeling the careful walls she'd built around her past crumbling down, brick by brick. The harsh scrubbing sound echoed through the quiet suburban street as Rachel worked the brush against her fence. Soapy water dripped down the white planks, slowly eating away at the cruel words sprayed in angry red paint. Her arms ached, but she kept going, determined to erase the hateful message before more neighbors could see it. A jogger passed by, eyes fixed straight ahead as if the fence and Rachel were invisible. Minutes later, Mrs. Lauder Rachel Peterson from next door walked her poodle past, clutching her purse a little tighter and crossing to the other side of the street. Rachel's cheeks burned, but she kept scrubbing. Can I help, Mom? Emily's small voice came from behind her. Rachel turned to see her daughter standing there in her favorite yellow t-shirt, holding another brush from under the kitchen sink. Honey, you don't have to, Rachel started. I want to, Emily insisted, dipping her brush in the bucket of soapy water. Besides, 2 people work faster than 1. That's math, and I'm good at math. Rachel's heart squeezed as Emily attacked a particularly stubborn streak of red paint. Her daughter's face was set with determination, her ponytail swinging as she scrubbed. You know, Emily said between scrubs, Tommy Miller asked me today if you really killed people. She didn't stop working, didn't look up. I told him my mom's a hero who protected people. That's what soldiers do. The brush slipped from Rachel's fingers, clattering against the fence. Tears she'd been holding back all day spilled down her cheeks. Emily dropped her brush too and wrapped her arms around Rachel's waist. Don't cry, Mom. I'm not ashamed of you. Never. Rachel pulled her daughter close, not caring that her tears were dampening Emily's hair. All her careful plans to shield Emily from her past, all her attempts to be just another small-town mom, none of it had protected her daughter from this moment. I'm sorry, baby, Rachel whispered. I'm so sorry you have to deal with this. Emily pulled back, her face serious. Mom, remember what you always tell me? That running from bullies just makes them bolder? Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Well, Emily continued, maybe it's time to stop running from your past, too. The wisdom in those words, coming from her 10-year-old, hit Rachel like a physical force. She'd been so focused on burying her military service, on becoming someone new, that she'd forgotten her own advice about facing challenges head-on. Standing up, Rachel squared her shoulders. You're right, sweetheart. No more running. They finished cleaning the fence together, working in comfortable silence. When the last trace of red was gone, Rachel studied her daughter's determined face and made a decision. Emily, would you like to learn some self-defense moves? Nothing scary, just basic stuff that every girl should know? Emily's eyes lit up. Really? Like what you know? Just the basics, Rachel emphasized. Things that could help you stay safe, if you need them. They cleared space in the living room, pushing the coffee table aside. Rachel showed Emily how to stand with confidence, how to be aware of her surroundings. They practiced simple wrist breaks and how to get away if someone grabbed her arm. "Remember," Rachel explained, demonstrating a move slowly, "this isn't about hurting anyone. It's about being strong and confident, about knowing you can protect yourself if you need to." Emily mimicked the movement carefully. "Like you did at the diner?" "Exactly. The goal is to stay safe and get away, not to fight." They practiced for an hour, Rachel carefully correcting Emily's form, praising her efforts. It felt surprisingly good to share this part of herself with her daughter. Not the violent aspects, but the discipline, the awareness, the confidence that came with knowing how to protect oneself. "You're a natural," Rachel said, as Emily successfully broke free from a simple hold, "just like your dad was." Emily paused, surprised. Rachel rarely talked about her late husband. "Dad knew this stuff too?" "That's how we met, actually. We were both in training." Rachel smiled at the memory. "He was terrible at first, but he never gave up. That's where you get your determination from." They ordered pizza for dinner, both too tired to cook. Sitting at their small kitchen table, Emily demonstrated her new stance to her stuffed bear while Rachel looked on, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "Mom?" Emily said between bites of pepperoni pizza. "Thanks for teaching me. I feel braver now." "You've always been brave, sweetie. You're the one who taught me to be brave today." Emily giggled. "Does this mean I can teach the moves to my friends? Let's start with you mastering them first." Rachel laughed, reaching for another slice. "Besides, I don't think Mrs. Whitfield would appreciate a playground full of mini martial artists." They both burst out laughing at the image of proper Mrs. Whitfield facing a group of karate-chopping fifth graders. For a moment, the weight of the lawsuit, the cruel graffiti, and the town's judgment felt far away. They were just a mother and daughter, sharing pizza and jokes, finding strength in each other. As they cleaned up dinner, Rachel watched Emily carefully wrapping the leftover pizza. Her daughter moved with new confidence, standing a little taller, more aware of her movements. Maybe that's what this was all about. Not hiding who you are, but learning to stand tall despite what others might think. "Ready for homework?" Rachel asked, rinsing the last plate. "Can we practice those moves again first?" Emily asked hopefully. "Just for a little bit?" Rachel dried her hands on a dish towel, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Just for a little bit," she agreed. Then math. The warm aroma of melted cheese and tomato sauce filled Rachel's small living room. She settled deeper into the worn couch cushions, wrapping an arm around Emily, who snuggled close against her side. On the TV screen, their favorite animated movie played, one they'd watched countless times before. "Can I have another slice, Mom?" Emily asked, her eyes bright in the flickering light from the television. Rachel glanced at the half-empty pizza box on the coffee table. "Just one more. It's getting late." Emily reached for a slice, careful not to drop any toppings on the blanket draped across their laps. Rachel watched her daughter's profile, heart swelling with love. These quiet moments felt precious, especially after everything they'd been through lately. "I talked to Pastor Grace today," Rachel said during a quiet moment in the movie. "We're thinking about doing something at the church. A special meeting where people can learn about being brave." Emily perked up. "Like how you're brave?" Rachel smoothed her daughter's hair. "Different kinds of bravery. Pastor Grace says everyone has courage inside them. They just need to find it sometimes." "Can I come?" "Of course you can." Rachel smiled. "Actually, Pastor Grace thought maybe you could help. Tell people about what you said at your school assembly." Emily's face lit up. "Really? That would be awesome." She took another bite of pizza, chewing thoughtfully. "Maybe if people hear more stories about being brave, they won't be so scared of you anymore." The innocent observation struck Rachel's heart. She hugged Emily closer, touched by her daughter's understanding of their situation. "You know what? I think you might be right." They turned their attention back to the movie. Rachel found herself relaxing more than she had in weeks. The lawsuit still loomed, and some neighbors still whispered, but things felt different now. Pastor Grace's support had given her strength. Emily's unwavering love and pride helped even more. As the movie reached its middle section, Rachel got up to make some hot chocolate. In the kitchen, she pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet and thought about the community seminar they were planning. Pastor Grace had suggested focusing on real stories of everyday courage, not just physical bravery, but moral courage too. The kind it takes to stand up for what's right, to protect others, to face fears. When Rachel returned with the steaming mugs, she found Emily's eyes growing heavy. The girl accepted her hot chocolate with a sleepy, "Thanks," but barely made it through half before her head started nodding. Rachel watched her daughter drift off, the empty pizza box forgotten on the table. Emily's face looked so peaceful in sleep, reminding Rachel of when she was just a baby. Back then, Rachel had worried constantly about being a good mother, especially after losing her husband. Now she realized that love had guided her all along. The same love that had made her leave her military career to give Emily a stable home. The movie's ending credits rolled across the screen. Rachel carefully extracted herself from under the blanket and turned off the TV. The room fell into comfortable silence, broken only by Emily's soft breathing. For a long moment, Rachel just stood there, taking in the scene. The pizza box, scattered napkins, 2 mugs on the coffee table, her daughter curled up like a cat on the couch. Such simple things, but they meant everything. Moving quietly, Rachel gathered Emily into her arms. Though her daughter was getting bigger, Rachel could still carry her, thanks to keeping up her strength with regular workouts. Emily stirred slightly but didn't wake as Rachel climbed the stairs. In Emily's bedroom, Rachel gently laid her daughter on the bed. She carefully removed Emily's socks and pulled the covers up. The girl immediately curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit, a gift from her father before his last deployment. Rachel tucked the blanket snugly around Emily's shoulders and kissed her forehead. "Sweet dreams, sweetheart," she whispered. Back downstairs, Rachel cleaned up their movie night mess. As she wiped down the coffee table, she thought about Pastor Grace's words from earlier that day. Sometimes God uses our struggles to help others find their way. Maybe that's what this community seminar could do. Help people understand that strength and gentleness weren't opposites, but 2 sides of the same coin. Rachel loaded the dishwasher and put away the leftover pizza. The kitchen clock showed just past 10. Not too late, but she felt ready for bed herself. The evening had left her feeling hopeful, more centered than she'd been since the incident at the diner. Heading upstairs, Rachel paused to check on Emily one more time. Her daughter slept peacefully, one arm thrown above her head. Rachel smiled, thinking about Emily's excitement over participating in the seminar. Her girl had such a big heart, always wanting to help. In her own bedroom, Rachel changed into her favorite soft pajamas and went through her nightly routine. She said her prayers, grateful for this moment of calm, for Emily's resilience, for Pastor Grace's wisdom and support. Maybe things were finally turning around. Rachel switched off her bedside lamp and settled under the covers. Through her window, she could see stars twinkling in the clear night sky. Her eyes grew heavy as she listened to the familiar sounds of her home, the quiet hum of the heating system, the occasional creak of settling wood, the distant whisper of wind in the trees. Just as sleep began to take hold, a sharp crash shattered the silence. Rachel's eyes flew open, her heart suddenly pounding. The sound had come from downstairs, the unmistakable noise of breaking glass. Rachel's heart pounded as she raced down the stairs, her bare feet silent against the wooden steps. The cold night air hit her first, rushing through the kitchen from the broken window. Shards of glass sparkled on the floor like deadly diamonds in the moonlight. Her military training kicked in automatically. She pressed herself against the wall, scanning the dark kitchen for any movement. Nothing. Just the gentle flutter of her curtains in the breeze and the soft ticking of her wall clock. In the center of the scattered glass lay a red brick, wrapped in white paper, secured by rubber bands. Rachel's hands trembled as she carefully picked it up, avoiding the sharp edges. She unwrapped the note, her stomach dropping as she read the 4 words, scrawled in messy handwriting. "This isn't over. Mommy?" Emily's small voice came from the top of the stairs. "I heard a noise." "Stay up there, sweetheart," Rachel called back firmly. "There's broken glass down here. I don't want you to cut yourself." Rachel grabbed her phone from the kitchen counter and dialed Sheriff Daniels's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. "Sheriff? It's Rachel Martin. Someone just threw a brick through my kitchen window." "I'll be there in 10 minutes," he replied without hesitation. "Keep Emily upstairs and stay away from the windows." While waiting for the sheriff, Rachel grabbed her broom and began sweeping the glass into neat piles, keeping one eye on the broken window. Emily sat at the top of the stairs, hugging her knees to her chest, her face pale in the dim light. True to his word, Sheriff Daniels arrived quickly, his cruiser's lights casting rotating blue shadows through the kitchen. He examined the brick and note, his weathered face growing grimmer. "I'll have deputies drive by every hour," he promised, writing in his notepad. "And I'll put out an APB for any suspicious vehicles in the area." He looked up at Rachel, his eyes kind but worried. "You might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few days." Rachel shook her head. "This is our home. I won't let them chase us out." The sheriff nodded, understanding in his expression. "I'll have someone board up that window first thing in the morning. For now, push that cabinet in front of it." After he left, Rachel did exactly that, the heavy wooden cabinet scraping across the floor. Emily finally came downstairs, stepping carefully around the remaining glass. "Mom?" Her voice quivered. "Do I have to go to school tomorrow?" Rachel turned to find tears streaming down her daughter's face. Emily hadn't cried since the night in the alley, trying so hard to be brave. But now, her lower lip trembled, and she looked impossibly young in her pink pajamas. "Please don't make me go," Emily whispered. "What if they're waiting for me there?" Rachel's heart broke. She crossed the kitchen and pulled Emily into a tight hug, stroking her hair. "Oh, sweetie, come here." They sank down onto the kitchen floor together, Emily crawling into Rachel's lap like she used to when she was smaller. Rachel rocked her gently, remembering all the times she'd done this after Emily's father died. "I'm scared, Mom," Emily admitted into Rachel's shoulder. "Really scared." "I know, baby. I am too." Rachel pulled back slightly, wiping Emily's tears with her thumb. "But being scared doesn't mean we're not brave. Remember what Pastor Grace said? Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when we are afraid." Emily sniffled. "But what if something happens at school?" Rachel considered this carefully. Her daughter's fear was legitimate. She couldn't pretend everything was fine when clearly it wasn't. "How about this? You can stay home tomorrow, just for one day. We'll both take a breather, maybe watch some movies, make cookies. But then on Monday, we go back to our normal routine, because if we let them scare us into hiding, they win." Emily nodded slowly. "Like in my book about Rosa Parks? She was scared too, but she didn't let that stop her." "Exactly like that," Rachel smiled, proud of her daughter's understanding. "Now, let's try to get some sleep. I'll leave all the lights on tonight." They checked all the doors and windows again, Rachel's military training making the security sweep thorough and precise. She tucked Emily back into bed, surrounding her with her favorite stuffed animals. "Mom?" Emily caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course, sweetheart." Rachel settled into the chair beside Emily's bed, holding her daughter's hand as her breathing gradually steadied and slowed. The house creaked and settled around them, but Rachel stayed alert, listening for any unusual sounds. She thought about the brick, the threat, the growing danger. Her past life as a Special Forces operator had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now, every instinct screamed that this was just the beginning. Finally, Emily's grip on her hand relaxed, and soft snores filled the room. Rachel carefully extracted her fingers and tiptoed to the door, leaving it cracked open. She wouldn't sleep tonight. Couldn't sleep, but she could at least try to rest. In her own room, Rachel lay fully clothed on top of her bed covers, staring at the ceiling. The digital clock on her nightstand showed 2:47 a.m. when her eyes finally grew heavy. Just a few minutes, she told herself. Just a quick rest. The pre-dawn light was gray and weak when Rachel jerked awake, some sixth sense pulling her from sleep. Something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, too still. She rushed to Emily's room, her heart already knowing what she'd find. The bed was empty, the covers thrown back, Emily's favorite stuffed bear lying face down on the floor. Rachel's world tilted sideways as she stared at the vacant space where her daughter should have been sleeping safely. Emily was gone. Rachel's trembling fingers fumbled with her phone as she dialed Emily's name over and over. "Emily!" Her voice cracked with desperation as she ran from room to room. "Emily, baby, where are you?" The house remained silent, except for her frantic footsteps. Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs as she burst into Emily's bedroom for the third time. The pink bedspread lay rumpled, one corner trailing onto the floor. Emily's favorite stuffed rabbit had fallen face down beside the bed. Rachel checked every closet, behind every door, under every bed. Her Special Forces training warred with her maternal panic, one part of her mind cataloging details while the other screamed in terror. The front door was still locked. The back door's deadbolt remained secure. All windows were intact except for the broken kitchen window downstairs. With shaking hands, she dialed Sheriff Daniels. Her voice came out surprisingly steady. "Sheriff, Emily's gone. Someone's taken my baby." "I'm on my way," he said without hesitation. "Don't touch anything else in the house." Rachel paced the hallway, her bare feet cold against the wooden floors. 5 minutes. 10. Each second stretched like an hour until finally red and blue lights flashed through her windows. She flew down the stairs and yanked open the front door before the sheriff could knock. Daniels stood on her porch, his face grave in the strobing lights. "Show me her room." Rachel led him upstairs, pointing out details she'd noticed. "The covers are disturbed, but not like she got up herself. See how they're pulled toward the window? And her rabbit. She never sleeps without it." The sheriff nodded, his flashlight beam sweeping methodically across the room. "Let's check outside that window." In the dewy grass below Emily's window, clear boot prints marked the mud. Large prints, men's size. Rachel's training kicked in fully now, her eyes tracking the signs of struggle in the disturbed earth. "These are fresh," Sheriff Daniels said, crouching to examine them. "Within the last hour." He straightened, his face hardening. "This has Jake written all over it." "The drunk from the diner?" Rachel's hands clenched into fists. "Where would he take her? His family owns that old barn out on Route 23. Daniels pulled out his radio. "I'm calling for backup, but it'll take time to get a team together." "We don't have time." Rachel's voice was steel. "Every minute we wait." She couldn't finish the sentence. The sheriff studied her face. "You're right. But this isn't a military operation, Rachel. We do this by the book." "Then let me help. You know my background. Use it." Rachel met his gaze steadily. "I'm not some civilian who'll get in the way. I'm a mother with Special Forces training, and that monster has my daughter." Daniels hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay. But you follow my lead. No lone wolf heroics." Rachel ran upstairs, emerging minutes later in dark clothes and sturdy boots. She'd pulled her hair back tight, her face set with determined focus. The frightened mother was still there in her eyes, but now tempered with the calm precision of her training. "I'm ready," she said, checking her bootlaces one final time. Sheriff Daniels nodded grimly. "We'll take my car. Less obvious than the patrol vehicle." Rachel paused at her front door, one hand pressed against the frame. "Please," she whispered, her prayer barely audible, "please keep her safe until I get there." Then she straightened her shoulders and followed the sheriff into the darkness. The night air was cool against her face as they moved swiftly toward his car. Rachel's senses were hyper-aware. The rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an owl, the crunch of gravel under their feet. Every sound could be a clue, every shadow might hide answers. Her mind raced through scenarios, mapping out possibilities. The old barn was remote enough for privacy but close enough to reach quickly. Jake would be angry, unstable, likely still nursing his wounded pride from their first encounter. But he'd also be overconfident, probably not expecting such a fast response. "We'll approach from the east," Daniel said as they climbed into his car. "There's more cover from the tree line." Rachel nodded, her fingers flexing against her knees. All her years of training, all her combat experience, none of it had prepared her for this kind of fear. but she would use every bit of it now. She would need it all to bring Emily home. As they pulled away from the house, Rachel touched the small cross hanging from her neck, a gift from Emily last Christmas. She drew strength from it, from the love it represented. Her daughter was out there, scared and alone, counting on her mother to make everything right again. The sheriff's car moved silently through the sleeping town. Rachel stared into the darkness ahead, her mind focused on one thought. "Hold on, baby. Mommy's coming." Daniels turned onto Route 23, keeping his headlights off and slowing their speed. The moon slipped behind clouds, plunging the country road into deeper darkness. Perfect for their approach, but also perfect for anyone watching for pursuit. The familiar weight of responsibility settled over Rachel, the same feeling she'd known in combat. But this time, the stakes were infinitely higher. This wasn't about following orders or completing a mission. This was about saving her child. They pulled off onto a dirt track, the car's tires crunching softly on gravel. Daniels killed the engine. In the sudden silence, Rachel could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong, despite her fear. "Remember," Daniels whispered, "we do this smart. We do this right." Rachel nodded, double-checking her boots one last time. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake could cost Emily everything. The sheriff reached for his door handle, then paused. "You ready?" Rachel took one deep breath, centering herself the way she'd been taught years ago. When she opened her eyes, they were clear and focused. She wasn't just a mother now, and not just a soldier. She was both, and she would need both to survive what lay ahead. "Let's go get my daughter." Together they stepped out into the night, two shadows moving with purpose through the darkness. Ahead, somewhere in the black void, Emily was waiting. And nothing, not Jake, not his family, not the whole town, was going to stop Rachel from bringing her home. The early morning mist crept across the empty fields like ghostly fingers, making everything look strange and unfamiliar. Rachel sat in Sheriff Daniels' patrol car, her body tense as they drove slowly along the back roads. Every shadow, every movement caught her eye. "We'll find her," Sheriff Daniels said, his voice steady and reassuring. His weathered hands gripped the steering wheel as he navigated the winding country roads. "Tell me again what you noticed in Emily's room." Rachel closed her eyes, forcing herself to think like she'd been trained. The window wasn't broken. Someone knew how to unlock it from the outside. The boot prints were deliberate, heel to toe, not scattered like someone rushing. They knew what they were doing. Her voice caught. "And Emily, she would have fought, made noise unless she knew them," Sheriff Daniels finished grimly. The patrol car's headlights cut through the fog as they passed another empty field. Rachel's military instincts kicked in, pushing aside her panic. She scanned the landscape methodically, section by section, just as she'd been taught years ago. "Stop the car," Rachel suddenly commanded. She leaned forward, squinting through the windshield at something in the distance. Sheriff Daniels pulled over, and Rachel was out before the car fully stopped. She crouched down, studying the gravel at the side of the road. "Look here. Tire tracks. Fresh ones. They turned off the main road maybe an hour ago." The sheriff knelt beside her, shining his flashlight. "Good catch. These aren't from regular traffic, too deep. Someone was driving fast." They followed the tracks to a narrow dirt road that disappeared into the woods. Rachel's throat tightened as she spotted something familiar caught on a bramble bush. She picked up a small pink ribbon, the one Emily had worn in her hair yesterday. "She's leaving us breadcrumbs," Rachel whispered, clutching the ribbon. Her daughter was scared but thinking clearly, pride mixed with fear in her chest. Sheriff Daniels radioed for backup, keeping his voice low. "We should wait for—" "No." Rachel's tone was firm. "Every minute we wait is another minute Emily's with them. I'm going in." The sheriff studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay behind me. We do this by the book." They moved through the woods silently, Rachel falling naturally into her old training. Step heel to toe. Test each step for noise. Watch the wind direction. Her senses heightened, picking up details she normally ignored. Broken twigs, disturbed leaves, the faint smell of cigarette smoke carried on the breeze. The trees thinned out, revealing an old farmstead. A dilapidated house sagged to one side, its windows dark and empty. Behind it loomed a massive barn, its red paint long since faded to a dull rust color. Rachel's eyes caught movement, a shadow passing behind one of the barn's high windows. Sheriff Daniels gestured toward fresh tire tracks leading to the barn. Rachel nodded, pointing out footprints in the mud, small ones that could only belong to Emily, alongside larger boot prints matching those from their yard. They crept closer, using the early morning shadows for cover. Rachel's heart pounded so hard she worried they'd hear it inside the barn. Every fiber of her being wanted to rush in, to grab Emily and run. But her training held her back. Rush in blind, and you risk everything. She noticed details that others might miss: the barn door slightly ajar, a fresh padlock hanging unused on the latch. Someone had planned to lock it but hadn't gotten around to it yet. Through a gap in the wooden slats, she caught a glimpse of movement inside. Sheriff Daniels touched her arm, pointing to the back of the barn where a second door stood partially open. Rachel understood his silent message. They needed to cover both exits. A sudden cry from inside the barn made Rachel's blood freeze. "Mom!" Emily's voice, frightened but strong. Rachel moved toward the barn entrance, every step measured and deliberate. Her training warred with her maternal instincts. The soldier in her said to wait, to plan. The mother in her screamed to run straight in. She found middle ground between the two, advancing carefully but steadily. Sheriff Daniels positioned himself near the rear door, his hand on his holstered weapon. He gave Rachel a firm nod. They were ready. Rachel took a deep breath, centered herself. The mist swirled around her boots as she approached the barn door. Inside, she could hear muffled voices, Emily's among them. Her daughter was alive, was talking. That was something to hold on to. Keeping to the shadows, Rachel edged closer to the entrance. The old boards creaked beneath her feet, and she froze. But the sounds from inside continued unchanged. They hadn't heard her. The smell of hay and old wood filled her nostrils, mixing with the damp morning air. Her hand touched the rough wood of the barn door. Through the gap, she could see stacks of old hay bales, farm equipment covered in years of dust, and shadows moving in the back. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her hands were steady. This was the moment all her training had prepared her for, though she'd never imagined using those skills to save her own child. She thought of Emily's words at the school assembly, "My mom's my hero." Rachel steeled herself, pushing away fear and doubt. Right now, Emily needed her to be that hero. Rachel stepped toward the barn entrance, her every sense alert and ready. Her daughter was inside, waiting for rescue, and nothing, not fear, not the past, not the whole town's judgment, was going to stop her from bringing Emily home. The musty smell of old hay and rotting wood filled Rachel's nostrils as she crept toward the barn's entrance. Her heart stopped when she heard Emily's muffled whimpers coming from inside. The sound sent ice through her veins, but her training kicked in, steadying her nerves and sharpening her focus. Sheriff Daniels positioned himself at the barn's far side, communicating silently with hand signals they'd agreed upon earlier. Rachel nodded, understanding the plan. She'd go in first. She was lighter on her feet and knew how to move without making a sound. The barn door creaked slightly, as Rachel eased it open just enough to slip inside. Pale morning light filtered through gaps in the wooden walls, creating strips of visibility in the darkness. Her eyes adjusted quickly, scanning the space methodically. Old farm equipment cast strange shadows. Piles of moldy hay lay scattered across the dirt floor. "You ruined everything," a man's voice echoed through the barn, angry, slurred. "My reputation, my family's standing, all gone because of you." Rachel's jaw clenched as she recognized the drunk man's voice. He was somewhere in the hayloft above. She could make out Emily's shape now, tied to a support beam near the back of the barn. Her daughter's eyes were wide with fear, but she wasn't physically hurt from what Rachel could see. "The whole town thinks I'm some kind of monster now," the man continued ranting. He paced back and forth in the loft, his footsteps making the old boards creak. "Me? When you're the one who's dangerous? You and your military killing skills?" Rachel moved silently along the wall, keeping to the shadows. Her bare feet helped her avoid any noise, though splinters pricked her skin. She'd left her boots in the car, knowing stealth would be crucial. Every step brought her closer to Emily. "I'm going to show everyone what you really are," he shouted, his voice growing more unhinged. "When they find your precious daughter here, they'll know the truth about you." Emily whimpered again, and Rachel had to fight every maternal instinct that screamed at her to rush forward. Instead, she forced herself to move carefully, strategically. She could see the man now, stumbling near the hayloft's edge. He held something in his hand. It looked like a bottle. Rachel caught Emily's eye and pressed a finger to her lips. Emily gave a tiny nod, hope replacing some of the fear in her expression. Rachel's heart swelled with pride at her daughter's bravery. "Hey!" Rachel called out, stepping into a shaft of light. "It's me you want to hurt. Leave my daughter out of this." The man spun around, nearly losing his balance. "Well, well, the hero mom comes to save the day," he sneered, taking a swig from his bottle. "But who's going to save you?" Rachel kept her voice calm, remembering her negotiation training. "You're right about one thing. I am dangerous when I need to be. But everything I did to protect myself and others. Just like I'm going to protect my daughter now." "Protect?" He laughed bitterly. "You assaulted me, humiliated me. My own brother won't even look me in the eye anymore." "You attacked me first," Rachel said firmly. "But this can end right here. Just let Emily go, and we can talk about this like adults." The man's face twisted with rage. He hurled the bottle toward Rachel, who easily sidestepped it. The glass shattered against the wall behind her. "Mom!" Emily cried out. "It's okay, baby," Rachel assured her, never taking her eyes off the man. "Everything's going to be fine." The man started down the loft ladder, his movements clumsy from drinking. Rachel watched him carefully, noting his unsteady balance, his delayed reactions. She could use those against him. "You think you're so much better than me," he snarled, reaching the ground. "Little Miss Perfect with her Special Forces training, but you're just a killer in an apron." Rachel remained still as he approached, waiting for the right moment. "I'm a mother," she corrected him quietly. "And you're threatening my child." He lunged forward suddenly, trying to grab her. Rachel moved like water, flowing around his attempt while using his own momentum to send him stumbling past her. He crashed into a stack of old crates, cursing. "Last chance," Rachel warned. "Surrender now, and this ends peacefully." The man scrambled to his feet, face red with fury. He charged again, swinging wildly. Rachel blocked his first punch and deflected the second, never striking back. She could smell the alcohol on his breath as she moved around him, staying between him and Emily. "Fight back!" he screamed in frustration. "Show everyone what you really are." "I'm showing them right now," Rachel replied calmly. When he attacked again, she used a simple joint lock, applying just enough pressure to bring him to his knees. No excessive force, no dramatic moves, just controlled, defensive technique. "Mom!" Emily called out again, but this time her voice held relief rather than fear. The man struggled against Rachel's hold, but she maintained steady pressure. "It's over," she told him firmly. "You've lost. But not because I'm violent, because I chose not to be." Sheriff Daniels burst through the barn door, gun drawn. "Don't move," he commanded, quickly taking in the scene. Rachel held the man still while Daniels approached with handcuffs. Only when she heard the metal click around his wrists did she release her hold. Then she was running to Emily, her hands shaking as she untied the ropes. "Baby, are you okay? Did he hurt you?" Rachel's voice cracked as she pulled Emily into her arms. Tears streamed down both their faces as they clung to each other. "I knew you'd come," Emily sobbed into Rachel's shoulder. "I knew you'd save me." Rachel stroked Emily's hair, her own tears falling freely now. "Always, baby. I'll always come for you." She pulled back just enough to look at Emily's face, checking for any injuries. Finding none, she hugged her daughter close again, feeling Emily's heart beating against her chest, the most precious rhythm in the world. Behind them, Sheriff Daniels read the man his rights as he led him toward the barn door. Rachel barely heard the words. All that mattered was the weight of Emily in her arms, safe and whole. They stayed like that, holding each other and crying, as morning light continued to stream through the barn's wooden walls, turning their tears to gold. The morning sun cast long shadows across Rachel's front lawn as she sat with Emily on their living room couch. Sheriff Daniels' patrol car remained parked outside, its presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the night's events. Emily hadn't let go of her mother's hand since they'd returned home, and Rachel couldn't blame her. Through the window, Rachel watched as neighbors began to gather on the sidewalk. Some stood in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones while casting concerned glances at the house. Others walked up to Sheriff Daniels, who was giving statements and answering questions. The crowd grew steadily larger as word spread through the small town. Mrs. Peterson from next door broke away from the group and marched up to Rachel's porch, her face etched with worry. She knocked gently on the door. Rachel hesitated, then squeezed Emily's hand. "It's okay, sweetie. It's just Mrs. Peterson." When Rachel opened the door, Mrs. Peterson's eyes welled with tears. "Oh, Rachel," she said, pulling her into a tight hug. "We had no idea. We're so sorry about everything." More neighbors drifted toward the house, their faces showing shame and regret. Mr. Jenkins from the diner pushed through the crowd, his usually jolly face serious. "Rachel," he called out, "we should have stood by you from the start." Sheriff Daniels raised his voice to address the gathering crowd. "Listen up, everyone," he announced, his badge glinting in the morning light. "I want to set the record straight about Rachel Martin." The murmuring crowd fell silent. What we witnessed last night wasn't just a mother protecting her child, though that would be enough. We saw a trained professional using her skills with remarkable restraint to save her daughter without causing unnecessary harm. Emily peeked out from behind Rachel, still holding tight to her mother's shirt. Sheriff Daniels smiled at her before continuing. "Mrs. Martin's military background isn't something to fear, it's something to be grateful for. She's been a quiet guardian in our community, asking nothing in return except to live peacefully with her daughter." A news van pulled up, and 2 reporters jumped out with cameras and microphones. Rachel instinctively stepped back, but Pastor Grace, who had just arrived, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes," she whispered, "your story needs to be heard to help others find their courage." The reporters approached respectfully, and the female journalist spoke softly. "Mrs. Martin, would you be willing to share your thoughts about what happened?" Rachel looked down at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, Rachel faced the cameras. "I'm just a mother who wants to protect her child," she began, her voice steady. "My military training taught me how to handle dangerous situations, but my faith taught me how to face fear with grace." She hugged Emily closer. "This community is our home. Despite everything, we believe in the power of forgiveness and healing." Mrs. Whitfield pushed through the crowd, clutching a covered dish. Her face was red with embarrassment. "Rachel," she said, her voice trembling, "I brought your favorite casserole. I'm so sorry for spreading those awful rumors." She set the dish down and wrung her hands. "Can you ever forgive me?" Rachel's eyes softened. "Of course," she said, reaching out to squeeze Mrs. Whitfield's hand. "We all make mistakes. It's how we learn from them that matters." Throughout the afternoon, a steady stream of townspeople arrived at Rachel's door. They brought more than just food. They brought apologies, support, and promises to do better. The porch slowly filled with casseroles, freshly baked bread, and bouquets of flowers. Children from Emily's class came with handmade cards, and parents offered to organize a neighborhood watch. Sheriff Daniels returned after handling the press and paperwork. "The man's going away for a long time," he assured Rachel, "and his family's dropping the lawsuit. They're actually hoping to make amends." Emily, finally feeling secure enough to leave her mother's side, helped arrange the flowers that kept arriving. Each new bouquet seemed to bring more color back to her cheeks. Rachel watched her daughter, amazed at children's resilience and capacity for forgiveness. Pastor Grace organized an impromptu prayer circle on the front lawn. "Let this be a reminder," she said to the gathered crowd, "that judgment divides us, but love and understanding unite us. Rachel and Emily have shown us what true strength looks like." As the sun began to set, Rachel's porch had transformed into a testament of community support. Casserole dishes were stacked 3 deep on every surface. Flowers filled every available container, their sweet scent mixing with the aroma of fresh-baked bread. Cards and notes of encouragement were pinned to the screen door, and bags of groceries lined the steps. The crowd finally began to thin as evening approached, but the warmth of their support remained. Rachel stood on her porch, Emily at her side, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love from their neighbors. Their little house, which had felt so vulnerable just hours ago, now felt like the safest place in the world, not because of locks or alarms, but because of the protective circle of community that surrounded them. Mrs. Peterson was the last to leave, promising to return tomorrow to help organize all the food. As she walked away, Emily tugged on Rachel's sleeve. "Mom," she said, gesturing at the overflowing porch, "I think we're going to need a bigger freezer." Rachel laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet street. For the first time in weeks, it was a laugh free from worry, full of genuine joy and relief. Their home was more than just a house now. It had become a symbol of healing for the entire town. The polished wooden benches of the county courthouse creaked as Rachel adjusted her position, smoothing down her navy blue skirt suit. Emily sat beside her in a floral dress, her small hand tucked firmly in her mother's. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as townspeople filled the public gallery. Rachel's public defender, Sarah Mitchell, arranged papers on their table with quiet confidence. "Remember," she whispered to Rachel, "we have truth on our side." At the opposite table, the drunk man James Henderson sat with his expensive lawyer in a tailored suit that couldn't hide his nervous fidgeting. Dark circles under his eyes suggested sleepless nights in county jail since the kidnapping incident. Judge Margaret Wilson entered, her black robes swishing as she took her seat. "All rise," called the bailiff, and the room rustled to attention. "Be seated," Judge Wilson said, adjusting her glasses. "We're here today regarding Henderson versus Martin, civil case number 2023, CV 456, allegations of excessive force." She looked at both parties. "I understand there are new developments?" The district attorney stood. "Your Honor, in light of recent events, we're introducing evidence of Mr. Henderson's criminal activities, including the kidnapping of a minor and a pattern of harassment." Rachel felt Emily squeeze her hand tighter. She wrapped her arm around her daughter's shoulders, drawing her close. "Furthermore," the DA continued, "we have testimony from multiple witnesses regarding Mr. Henderson's behavior at Martin's diner that night, confirming Miss Martin used only necessary force to protect herself." Sheriff Daniels, sitting in the front row, nodded firmly. He testified earlier about finding Rachel's defensive moves textbook perfect and showing remarkable restraint. The judge reviewed the new documents, her expression growing stern. "Mr. Henderson's actions show a clear pattern of escalating violence. Ms. Martin's military background, far from being a liability, demonstrates her discipline and control." Henderson's lawyer stood, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw his lawsuit and—" "Sit down," Judge Wilson cut him off. "This court has something to say." She removed her glasses, fixing Henderson with a steely gaze. "Mr. Henderson, you didn't just assault Ms. Martin. You terrorized a family. You threatened a community, and when faced with someone who could defend herself, you tried to twist the law to punish her for your own actions." Rachel felt tears welling up as the judge continued. "Ms. Martin," Judge Wilson's voice softened, "this court commends your restraint. You could have seriously injured Mr. Henderson that night. Instead, you used minimal force to protect yourself. Even when he kidnapped your daughter," the judge's voice cracked slightly, "you chose to subdue him without excessive harm. Your military training taught you how to fight, but your character taught you when not to." Emily beamed up at Rachel, pride shining in her eyes. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "this court recognizes your service to our country and your continued service to this community. The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice." She banged her gavel. "Mr. Henderson, you'll be remanded to custody pending criminal charges." The bailiff approached Henderson, who seemed to shrink in his chair. Mrs. Whitfield, sitting near the back, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Other townspeople nodded in approval, some reaching out to pat Rachel's shoulder as she stood. Pastor Grace, who had attended every hearing, smiled warmly from her seat. "The truth always comes to light," she said softly. Mr. Jenkins, Rachel's boss from the diner, grinned and gave her a thumbs up. He'd testified about Rachel's gentle nature with customers, even difficult ones, and her patience during long shifts. Rachel gathered her things, helped Emily with her backpack, and walked toward the courthouse doors. Emily skipped beside her, practically bouncing with joy. "Does this mean it's really over, Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's really over." They pushed open the heavy wooden doors together. Bright sunlight flooded the courthouse steps, where a crowd had gathered. As Rachel and Emily emerged, the assembled townspeople broke into applause. Rachel stopped, overwhelmed. The steps were lined with familiar faces, regular customers from the diner, Emily's teachers, parents from soccer practice, church members. They clapped and cheered, some holding welcome signs. Mrs. Peterson, who lived next door, stepped forward with a bouquet of flowers. "We're sorry we ever doubted you," she said, pressing the flowers into Rachel's hands. Emily tugged at Rachel's sleeve, pointing. "Look, Mom!" A banner stretched across the courthouse railings read, "Our Hero, Rachel Martin." Below it stood Sheriff Daniels with his deputies, all in formal uniform, saluting her service both past and present. The applause continued as mother and daughter descended the steps together, hands clasped tight, into the embrace of their community. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Rachel sat with Emily in their usual spot, third row from the front, but something felt different this Sunday morning. Instead of the sideways glances and whispered judgments that had plagued them weeks before, friendly faces and warm smiles surrounded them. Emily wore her favorite yellow dress, her legs swinging happily as she colored in her children's Bible. Rachel smoothed her daughter's hair, heart full of gratitude for these peaceful moments they could now enjoy without fear. Pastor Grace stood at the pulpit, her silver-streaked hair neatly pinned back, wearing a purple dress that seemed to catch all the morning light. Her kind eyes swept across the congregation as she opened her Bible. "Today," Pastor Grace began, her voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary, "I want to talk about courage, not the kind we read about in action movies or comic books, but the quiet strength that comes from faith and love." Rachel felt Emily squeeze her hand. They both knew who had inspired today's message. "We've witnessed something remarkable in our community these past weeks," Pastor Grace continued. "We've seen how quick judgments can cloud our hearts, how fear can make us forget the command to love our neighbors. But we've also seen the power of truth, forgiveness, and God's endless grace." Several heads turned toward Rachel, but this time the looks held respect rather than suspicion. Mr. Jenkins, her boss from the diner, sat 2 rows behind them with his wife. He gave Rachel an encouraging nod. "Sometimes," Pastor Grace said, her voice growing passionate, "God places warriors among us, not to bring violence, but to protect, to stand against darkness when others might falter. Like David, who was both a warrior and a man after God's own heart, we've learned that strength and gentleness can exist in the same spirit." Rachel felt tears welling up in her eyes. For so long, she'd tried to bury her past, seeing her military training as something that made her different, dangerous even. But now, sitting here with Emily safe beside her, she understood it had always been a gift, one that God had used to protect not just her daughter, but others too. "When we judge without understanding," Pastor Grace continued, "when we let fear guide our hearts instead of love, we risk missing the blessings God has placed in our midst. We risk becoming like the Pharisees, so focused on our own righteousness that we miss the truth standing right before us." In the pew across the aisle, Mrs. Whitfield dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. The older woman's shoulders trembled slightly as she listened to the sermon. Rachel remembered all the whispered conversations, the suspicious glances, the way Mrs. Whitfield had led the charge in questioning Rachel's character. But even that memory no longer stung like it used to. The sermon continued, weaving together scripture and recent events, reminding the congregation about redemption, forgiveness, and the importance of standing together as a community. When Pastor Grace finally said, "Amen," There wasn't a dry eye in the house. As the congregation rose for the closing hymn, Emily's clear voice rang out beside Rachel, singing Amazing Grace with all her heart. Rachel joined in, feeling the music wash over her like a healing balm. After the service, people gathered in the fellowship hall for coffee and donuts. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with the buzz of conversation and children's laughter. Emily ran off to join her Sunday school friends at a table with cookies and juice. Rachel was adding cream to her coffee when she felt a gentle touch on her arm. She turned to find Mrs. Whitfield standing there, her usually perfect makeup slightly smudged from tears. "Rachel, dear," Mrs. Whitfield began, her voice wavering, "I owe you an apology. A big one." The older woman twisted her handkerchief in her hands. "I was so wrong about you. The things I said, the way I acted. I let fear and prejudice guide me instead of Christian love." Rachel set down her coffee cup. "Mrs. Whitfield, please, let me finish," the older woman insisted. "When I saw how you protected Emily, how you showed mercy even to that awful man who took her, well, it showed me what true strength looks like. I'm so ashamed of how I treated you." Rachel reached out and took Mrs. Whitfield's trembling hands in hers. "We all make mistakes," she said softly. "What matters is that we learn from them." Mrs. Whitfield's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You're too kind. I don't deserve your forgiveness." "That's exactly why we need it," Rachel smiled. "Besides, Emily's already forgiven you for those times you didn't wave back to her at the grocery store." This surprised a watery laugh from Mrs. Whitfield. "That child of yours? She has such a beautiful heart, just like her mother." Pastor Grace approached them, her face glowing with joy at the reconciliation she was witnessing. "Rachel, do you have a moment?" Rachel nodded, giving Mrs. Whitfield's hands one final squeeze before the older woman moved away to join some other church ladies. "I've been thinking," Pastor Grace said, leading Rachel to a quiet corner of the fellowship hall. "Your story, your journey of faith through all of this, it's powerful. We're planning a women's seminar next month about finding strength in difficult times. Would you consider speaking?" Rachel's first instinct was to decline. Public speaking had never been her thing, and sharing her story still felt vulnerable. But then she caught sight of Emily across the room, proudly showing her friends a new bracelet she'd made in Sunday school. "You know," Rachel said slowly, "for so long I tried to hide who I was, thinking it would protect Emily. But she taught me that being honest about our struggles, about who we are, that's what really makes us strong." Pastor Grace smiled. "Is that a yes?" Rachel took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, I'll do it. If my story can help others find their courage, then it's worth sharing." "Wonderful," Pastor Grace squeezed her arm. "We'll talk more about the details later. Right now, I think someone's looking for you." Emily was indeed making her way through the crowd, clutching a paper plate with a chocolate donut. "Mom, can I have this one? Mrs. Jenkins said it was okay." Rachel laughed, pulling her daughter close with one arm. "Just this once," she said, watching Emily's face light up. Looking around the fellowship hall at the familiar faces that now showed friendship instead of judgment, Rachel felt a deep sense of peace. Here, in this moment, she was exactly who she was meant to be: a mother, a protector, and a woman of faith. No longer afraid to embrace all the parts of her story. The morning sun peeked through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the checkerboard floor tiles. Rachel moved between tables with practiced ease, refilling coffee cups for the handful of regulars who dotted the quiet dining room. The breakfast rush had ended, leaving behind the peaceful lull that always settled over the diner during mid-morning. Mr. Jenkins stood behind the counter, wiping down the surface with slow, circular motions. His weathered face creased into a gentle smile as Rachel approached with the coffee pot. "You know what, Rachel? This place wouldn't be the same without you." Rachel felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Thanks, Mr. Jenkins. That means a lot." The bell above the door chimed, and Sheriff Daniels walked in, removing his hat, as he made his way to his usual spot at the counter. "Morning, folks," he said, nodding to both Rachel and Mr. Jenkins. "The usual, Sheriff?" Rachel asked, already reaching for a clean mug. You know me too well. He settled onto the stool, his badge catching the morning light. And make it a slice of apple pie, too, if you don't mind. Mr. Jenkins chuckled. For breakfast? After the month we've had? I'd say we've all earned a little extra sweetness. The sheriff's eyes met Rachel's, carrying understanding and respect. Rachel brought over his coffee and pie, then, at Mr. Jenkins' encouraging gesture, poured herself a cup and joined them. The diner was quiet enough that she could take a moment to sit. You know, Sheriff Daniels said, fork poised over his pie, what you did. It wasn't just about protecting yourself and Emily. You showed this whole town what real courage looks like. Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug, thinking of the past few weeks, the fear, the judgment, and finally, the understanding that had spread through the community. I just did what any mother would do. No, Mr. Jenkins said firmly. You did what a hero would do. You protected yourself without causing unnecessary harm, even when faced with real danger. That takes something special. Rachel felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes. She thought of Tom, her late husband, and how proud he would be of the life she'd built for herself and Emily. The morning sunlight seemed to wrap around her like a warm embrace, and she closed her eyes briefly, whispering a silent prayer of thanks for the strength she'd found within herself. I remember when you first came here, Mr. Jenkins continued, his voice soft with memory. Fresh start, you said. Looking for a quiet life. But sometimes God has other plans for us, doesn't he? Rachel nodded, thinking of how her military training, the very thing she'd tried to leave behind, had become her salvation. Tom used to say that our past shapes us, but it doesn't have to define us. Wise man your husband, Sheriff Daniels said, and he'd be mighty proud of how you've handled everything. The whole town's proud, Mr. Jenkins added. Even Mrs. Whitfield was in here yesterday, telling anyone who'd listen about how wrong she'd been about you. Rachel couldn't help but laugh. Now that's something I never thought I'd hear. The morning light grew stronger, filling the diner with golden warmth. A few more customers trickled in, and Rachel stood to attend to them, but not before Sheriff Daniels spoke again. You know, Rachel, what you've done goes beyond just protecting yourself and Emily. You've shown this town that strength and gentleness aren't opposites, that you can be both powerful and kind. He's right, Mr. Jenkins agreed. And speaking of Emily, that daughter of yours is something special too. The way she stood up for you, never doubting for a second. Rachel's heart swelled with pride. She's my whole world. The morning passed peacefully, with Rachel moving between tables, sharing warm smiles with customers who now greeted her with genuine affection rather than suspicion. Around noon she hung up her apron and gathered her things. Heading out to pick up Emily? Mr. Jenkins asked. Yes, it's early release day at school. Rachel smiled, thinking of her daughter's excited face when she'd reminded her this morning. Give that girl a hug from her Uncle Jenkins, he said, using the title Emily had given him months ago. Will do. Rachel paused at the door, looking back at the two men who had stood by her through everything. And thank you both. For everything. The walk to Emily's school was pleasant, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. Rachel took her time, enjoying the simple pleasure of being able to walk down the street without worry or fear. Neighbors waved from their porches, and passing cars honked friendly greetings. Outside the school, parents gathered in small groups, chatting and laughing as they waited for their children. Rachel noticed how naturally they included her now, with genuine smiles and warm hellos. The school bell rang, and moments later, Emily burst through the doors, her backpack bouncing as she ran toward her mother. Mom! Emily crashed into Rachel with a fierce hug. We learned about heroes in class today, and I told everyone about you. Rachel hugged her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Is that right? Uh-huh. And Mrs. Thompson said that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stay kind, even when others aren't kind to us. Emily beamed up at her mother. Just like you did, Mom. Together they began their walk home, Emily's hand warm in Rachel's as she chattered about her day. The afternoon sun cast their shadows long behind them, and Rachel felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The path ahead was clear and bright, and they walked toward it with steady steps, mother and daughter, their bond stronger than ever. Each step felt like a blessing, a reminder of how far they'd come. Rachel listened to Emily's stories, adding the occasional, "Oh, really?" and "That's wonderful," as they made their way through the familiar streets of their town, their home, more truly now than ever before. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the church hall, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden floor. Rachel stood at the podium, her hands resting lightly on its edges as she gazed out at the sea of familiar faces. Nearly 50 women filled the rows of chairs, their expressions expectant and warm. In the front row, Emily sat between Pastor Grace and Mrs. Whitfield, practically bouncing with excitement. Rachel took a deep breath, smoothing her simple blue dress. "When I first came to this town," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I thought I had to hide who I was to keep my daughter safe. I believed that my past, my training, my service, was something to be ashamed of." A gentle murmur rippled through the crowd. Rachel's eyes found Emily's encouraging smile, and strength flowed through her. "But God doesn't give us skills and strength just to bury them," she continued. "Sometimes our deepest wounds, our biggest fears, become the very things that help us protect others." She stepped around the podium, choosing to stand closer to her audience. "I spent years running from my training, trying to forget the woman I used to be. But that woman, that soldier, she was also a gift from God. When danger came to our town, it wasn't just my mother's heart that protected Emily. It was everything I am, everything I've learned, everything I tried to hide." Mrs. Whitfield dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Other women nodded, some reaching for their own handkerchiefs. "Fear tells us to hide," Rachel said, her voice growing stronger. "It whispers that we're too broken, too different, too dangerous to belong. But fear lies." She paused, letting the words sink in. "God doesn't waste our pain. Every scar, every struggle, every moment that shaped us, He can use it all for good." Emily beamed up at her mother, pride shining in her young face. Rachel felt tears prick at her own eyes but kept going. "When that man attacked me in the alley, I was terrified. Not of him, but of everyone finding out who I really was. I thought if people knew about my military past, they'd reject us." She shook her head, smiling softly. "Instead, this community taught me something beautiful about acceptance and grace." Pastor Grace nodded encouragingly from her seat, her eyes warm with understanding. "Yes, I served in special forces. Yes, I know how to defend myself and others. But that doesn't make me dangerous, it makes me prepared. Prepared to protect my daughter. Prepared to stand up against evil. Prepared to show others that strength and gentleness can live in the same heart." Several women were openly crying now, including some who had once whispered against her. Rachel felt something healing in her own heart as she spoke. The night Emily was taken, her voice caught slightly, but she pressed on. "I realized God had prepared me for that moment long ago. Every bit of training, every hardship I'd faced, it all served a purpose. Not just to save my daughter, but to show this community what courage really looks like." She gestured to the women before her. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. It's using whatever gifts God gave you, even the ones that came through pain, to serve others, to protect, to love." Rachel stepped closer to the front row, where Emily's face glowed with joy and pride. "My daughter taught me that. She never wanted me to hide who I was. She saw strength where I saw shame. Through her eyes, I learned to see myself the way God sees me, not as someone dangerous, but as someone designed for purpose." Applause broke out, scattered at first, then building. Women stood, their faces wet with tears, but bright with understanding. Mrs. Whitfield was the first to step forward, arms outstretched for a hug. "Oh, Rachel," she whispered, "forgive us for ever doubting you." One by one, the women came forward, sharing hugs, whispering thanks, some sharing their own stories of hidden struggles and fears. Pastor Grace stepped up beside Rachel, squeezing her shoulder with maternal affection. But it was Emily who finally broke through the crowd, launching herself into her mother's arms. Rachel caught her, holding her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's shampoo. In that embrace, she felt the last chains of fear falling away. The need to hide, to minimize herself, to apologize for her strength, it all dissolved in the pure love and acceptance radiating from her daughter. Emily pulled back just enough to look into her mother's eyes. "You did it, Mom. You showed them who you really are." Rachel stroked her daughter's hair, amazed at how the fear that had once bound her had transformed into something powerful and purposeful. She wasn't just a former soldier trying to be a mom anymore. She wasn't just a survivor hiding her past. She was exactly who God had created her to be. All of her experiences, all of her strength, all of her love, working together for good. The late Sunday sun painted the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink, casting long shadows across Rachel's front yard. The evening air carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from Mrs. Peterson's garden next door, mixed with the earthy aroma of fresh-cut grass. Rachel and Emily sat together on the old wooden porch swing, its familiar creaking keeping time with their gentle rocking. Emily's math workbook lay forgotten on the small table beside them, next to 2 tall glasses of lemonade beading with condensation. The ice cubes clinked softly as Emily took a sip, her legs dangling just above the porch floor. She'd grown taller in these past months. Rachel noticed, not just in height, but in spirit too. "The sunset's pretty tonight," Emily said, leaning her head against Rachel's shoulder. Her honey-brown hair caught the golden light, reminding Rachel so much of her late husband's. "It sure is, sweetheart." Rachel wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, breathing in the peaceful moment. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the distant sound of children playing down the street and the occasional car passing by. A cool evening breeze rustled through the maple trees lining their street. Rachel watched as it stirred the American flag Mr. Jenkins had helped them hang last weekend. The sight brought a smile to her face, another symbol of how far they'd come, how much the community had embraced them. Emily traced the condensation on her glass with one finger, making little patterns that reminded Rachel of the self-defense moves they'd practiced together. But there was no tension in Emily's movements now, just the casual doodling of a content child. "Mom?" Emily's voice was thoughtful, carrying that mix of childhood innocence and surprising wisdom that often caught Rachel off guard. "Yes, honey? Remember when you used to check the locks 3 times every night?" Rachel nodded, running her fingers through Emily's hair. "I do. You don't do that anymore." "No, I don't." Rachel smiled, realizing Emily was right. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt that compelling need to double and triple check every window and door. The swing creaked steadily as they rocked, its rhythm as natural as breathing now. Down the street, Mrs. Whitfield waved as she walked her dog, and both Rachel and Emily waved back. The woman who had once spread whispers now brought them cookies every Sunday after church. Emily sat up straighter, turning to face her mother. The setting sun caught her eyes, making them shine like amber. "Mom?" she asked again, her voice carrying a hint of seeking reassurance. "Are we safe now?" Rachel's heart swelled with love and certainty. She thought about their home, their friends, their church family, all the pieces that had fallen into place since that night in the diner's alley. She thought about Pastor Grace's sermon that morning, about finding strength in vulnerability, and about Sheriff Daniels stopping by just yesterday to share coffee and conversation. She thought about the self-defense class she now taught at the community center, where women learned not just how to protect themselves, but how to carry themselves with confidence. She remembered the pride in Emily's eyes when she'd helped demonstrate proper stance last week. Rachel pulled Emily closer, feeling the steady beat of her daughter's heart against her side. "Yes, sweetheart," she answered softly, her voice full of quiet conviction. "Nobody's going to stop us now." Emily snuggled deeper into the embrace, sighing contentedly. The swing creaked its gentle lullaby as Rachel held her daughter close, both of them watching the horizon glow brighter with the last magnificent rays of the setting sun. The light caught the wind chimes Pastor Grace had given them, sending sparkles dancing across the porch like tiny stars come early. The evening wrapped around them like a warm blanket full of promise and peace. Here, in this moment, everything they'd fought for, everything they'd overcome, crystallized into something beautiful and unshakable. Their home wasn't just a house anymore, it was their sanctuary, their victory, their testament to courage and love. The last of the sun's rays painted the clouds in brilliant gold, and Rachel felt Emily's breathing grow steady and peaceful against her side. The same peace filled her own heart, replacing the watchful warrior with the content mother she'd always wanted to be. The horizon glowed brighter still, nature's own celebration of their new stability, their hard-won serenity. Time seemed to slow down as they rocked together on the swing, its familiar creak a reminder of all the ordinary moments that made up their extraordinary life. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, offering a silent prayer of gratitude for this perfect moment, for their safety, for their home, and most of all, for the precious gift of her daughter's trust and love. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Rachel Martin, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please, don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.